All right, guys, go ahead and. What's up? Can we hear each other?
Yes.
Yep. All right. Sounds good. Hey, everyone. It was kind of weird. I think I heard myself twice during the countdown. And I thought that when the countdown plays, it says that we're all supposed to be automatically muted. But I think I heard myself speak when I had it on the other tab, whatever. But anyways, it looks like we're okay. Let me say hello because it's not many people as usual to start off. I guess everybody's going to trickle in slowly as always, but a ton of comments given the amount of people. So let me just quickly say hello to you all. Already said hello, of course, Mr. Red Jack, #1 Marvel fan, as always. Rick Welch, what is up, sir? And Marcus, is Matt back to spill some tea? What's up? Hard saying hello to all of us. Yeah, look at that, to Mateo, including Mateo.
Yeah. My new name.
My #1 fan. What's up, Vivian? And what do we got? Okay, the Rickster. Who else? Matt, what have you heard about Ruben's sales show next week?
I heard it's great. Heard it's the best.
CJ, good to see you. And hellos again by my wife to you guys. And let's see, Gabe Carino. What's up, Gabe? Lovely to see you. And hello to everybody. The master of ceremonies, I do try. And oh, look at that. Heidjer's already getting in on the typing action too. And Jason Ludwig, what is up? Evening all into the. Oh, sorry to hear that, man. Stick around until the drugs kick in. Nice. Good to see you. Thanks for the support, even though you're sick. That's awesome, man. Tempting Toys. We're cool, apparently.
That's my buddy. That's
I was gonna say
#1 Transformers authority in the world. That's
wow. For toys?
Yeah.
I guess, right? Yeah. Nice. Tempting Toys. Lovely to have you. Welcome. Was a hot mic. Exactly, Rick. Yeah. And now Ruben the non-muted. Thanks, CJ. I guess I'm learning more about this software more and more every time. Let's see. Honey, why are you laughing at Heidjer? What did he say that was so funny?
I'm taller than you.
Huh? That you're taller than me? Yeah. Next time I'm definitely putting you larger on the graphic for sure, man. Now that I know. Look at that. Tom says he's around 6'2", apparently taller, according to him. So, hail Heidjer. Yeah. What's up, Jeff? Cheers, taking the wife and her mom out for their birthday dinner. Happy birthday. Their birthday. They're both born on the same day? I guess that's what you're saying. Happy birthday, both of them. That's cool. Yeah, no worries, dude. Save the juicy convo for hour 3. Nice. We'll do what we can, man. But with these two gents, I think it's going to get juicy from the get-go. So can't promise anything. Let's see. Hello. Have a good night out. Yes, exactly. Hey, Samaroni. Been a while, Mr. Ohio. What's up, man? And yes, get well soon, of course. Jason, have a great dinner. Yes, okay. Joseph Damon. What's up? What's up is that you're here again, and I'm very appreciative of you being here again. Thank you, Joseph. Very happy to see you. I hope you enjoy the discussion tonight. Let's have some fun, okay? Evening, Sam. Oh, so saying hello to Samaroni, of course. Yes, Ron Shepard. What's up? Good to see you. Hellos. Okay, back and forth. Hellos. Excellent. Okay, everybody, let me quickly, I want to get into our discussion, but let me quickly, before I do that, just do a couple of promos. First, I just wanted to mention, for those of you, I haven't done a public update on Zyla Parsons and her battle with cancer in a while, and just wanted to let you all know that Zyla has gone home. So she's at home now, resting comfortably. she got a scan done recently, but they won't get the results until they speak to the doctor tomorrow. But they say that it looks good. So I don't want to jump the gun, but they say it looks good. So yes, let's keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best for Zyla. And so what do we have? Yeah, sorry, I don't have to do that. I'll just pop this for Nick. So Nick, is as usual, I know you're not here, so I'll just I guess I'll tell you later when you pop in. Here you go. I found it this week. There's usually so much difficulty in finding your direct links. But there you go. Hopefully that works for everyone. That is for Nick's channel, everybody, for this, specifically for this Friday's upcoming show. Here you go, 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific. And this right here is the URL, youtube.com/theexp. So check that out. I believe he's back this week. Will Gabrielle took the reins this past Friday, and I believe that Nikki B's back this coming Friday. So there you go. Check that out. All right. So what else is there? I also have Carl Stottergren. I don't know. I don't think Carl's here at the moment, but I'm gonna put in a link for Carl because Carl put out a new video this week. And I wondered, it's an unboxing, and it's actually color guides, and it's kind of something that I've been wondering if I should do like an episode on. I know a lot of people are not into them, but they're kind of cool and super affordable and one of a kind, and that's what's
not anymore. Not anymore. They're not as affordable as they used to be. I mean,
they're starting. Yeah, some of them are starting to get up there, but again, compared to the art, the line art, they're still ridiculously dirt cheap. Well, the ones that he got on his video. Check it out, everybody. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but he picked up one of the full issues from Superman that were on sale, put up recently by Scott Kress at Catskill Comics. Yeah, $250 for a complete issue. Again, they're one of a kind, and it's not just people focus on the fact that they're all the haters, right? It's like, but they're just photocopies, and yes, they are just photocopies, but the hand coloring on them makes them unique and one of a kind, just as much as the line art, the black and white pencils and inks.
Paintings. I mean, they're paintings. These are brush paintings that happen to use a printed surface in order to apply their particular expertise. I mean, are we looking at inker pages as less than original art because it's ink on blue line? I mean, in some cases,
that's a whole nother show.
No, that's why I was saying that it's something that I could, I for a long time been considering kind of maybe I should do an episode just talking about that. I just don't know if, since most people aren't into them, I don't know whether an entire show could be done on that one topic, So that's why I kind of never have done it up until now.
I could spend a full month's salary on Steve Olaf pages.
Oh, that's Steve Olaf.
Just turned 70 years old this past week.
Happy birthday, Steve Olaf. Nice. Wow. Yeah, a lot of people. It's all the people from our youth are getting older. It's funny when you hear about they're all in their 70s now, Used to think about
I saw something in the comments, I think on Comic Art Live a couple of days ago, where Margaret Lee is like only 22 years old.
Who?
The collector, Margaret Lee. She's like a pretty prominent collector of stuff. She's like 22.
Yeah, she's into Legion. She likes the Legion.
Yeah.
She's only a 22-year-old?
I think I'm following a completely different Margaret Lee on social media that is not who I thought was this comic art collector. But no, she revealed that in the chat just a couple of days ago during the Jeffrey Moy sale. So I was like, whoa, like everybody was kind of shocked. I was like, my gosh, I was in my 30s when she was born. And certainly when some of these pages were older than she was, but that's fantastic. What a great thing to have in the hobby. The fact that, number one, that we have a prominent female collector who is of a generation that is a full 2 generations, since ours, which is, I love that, that gives this hobby a future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also wanted to just make a quick mention. I know a lot of people have heard by now. Rest in peace, Ramona Fradin, who passed away a few days ago.
97. I mean, for crying out, and drawing till the very end. Bless her heart. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, 97 years old. I mean, almost a century. I mean, that's just absolutely fantastic. And what's even better about that is that she was still very coherent and able to draw right to the end, pretty much.
Yeah.
You don't often get that at 97, So that's pretty amazing. You can't really wish anything more for someone who lives that long, that you live that long and were able to sort of have a normal, healthy life all the way to the end. That's amazing, right? And I think I would wish that for me and everybody else. Like, everybody should go that way, Yeah. So that's pretty fantastic, and it sort of softens the blow when I hear things like that, So that's really nice. Hey, Alberto, what's up? And yes, he's confirming that Margaret is a baby. What are blue lines? Let's not go there. Ramona still had her chops. Yeah, she certainly did. Blue lines better than cool lines. Oh, he's saying it out loud.
Yeah.
You know what, Alberto? I dare you to come back next week. Okay, I'll be doing an affordable art sale next week. That's what we'll be doing next Sunday. I dare you to come back for that next week when you see that Rich is in the audience and make the same comment.
I'm going to shift a little bit, and you're going to see a Sid Mead painting in the background there that I got from Mr. Stephen Donnelly. So I don't have much bad to say about the Donnelly brothers.
There you go.
I know people they don't post prices. We'll leave it at that.
Blue lines are what you see when you have too much tequila. You certainly, Hart. You certainly have too much tequila. Okay, so that's good. Thanks for popping in, everybody. Really appreciate it. I believe I've done all the promos I had to do. Let me just take one last check. Oh, Alberto says Rich is on Bill's show all the time, and we still give him crap. Okay, I don't know about that. I'm just saying, I'd like you to come back next week here when you see Rich. Only once you see he's in the chat, I want you to type the exact same comment you just did. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I mean, what's going to happen? I don't know. I don't think anything's going to happen, but whatever. I just want to see if you can do it. But yeah, so fantastic, everybody. I think that is the end of everything I wanted to do with the promos, and saying hello to everybody who's here with us now. And so yeah, why don't we get into this? Everyone, just so you all know, I mentioned this last week, and I think the week before, that tonight is essentially Heidjer's show. He and I were having a private chat. I don't know, 3-4 months back in November, I think it was October, November, and he brought up a few things as ideas that it would be fun to talk about, on a show with all of you guys and gals. And so yeah, we discussed it, and then it kind of got put off for various reasons. But because he brought it up, and he's got stuff on his mind that he's really he seems like he really wants to talk about this stuff. This is what I mean when I say this is basically Heidjer's show. So I wanted to obviously give him the platform, absolutely, because as I always say, I think we all love talking about this stuff that we're going to talk about tonight. Most of us talk about it with each other, privately anyways, so I just figured, yeah, why not? It's something that gets even more interesting when a lot of opinions are voiced, right? And what better way than to do it here tonight with several dozen of us who can sort of give our views on all these topics, right? So with that, oh my God, with that, I just want to say, hey, Caesar, have you been in Japan, Caesar? What's up? You haven't been on CAF. You haven't been here. You've just disappeared off the face of the earth for like, I don't know, a month or 2 months or something. I don't know. It feels that anyways. Good to see you, man. Well, what's up? Comic Art Channel in the house. What's up, Jason? Good to see you. Heidjer is an idea man, says CJ. We'll find out tonight. Just say no to blue lines. No. Say yes to blue lines. I almost bought some the other day, but price wasn't right. But don't say no to them. It's the published art, by the way. It's the art as published, the original inked art. So, hey Scott, what's up? What's up? How DC is better than Marvel? That's not what we're going to talk about tonight.
You said something. I have to speak to it now.
Yeah,
so
of course. Anytime you interject, of course.
This is going to drive the chat crazy. But because you just said it, it's like that the inked blue line art is the published art. Does that make the pencils prelims?
No, but, and I've said this before, so I'll just say it again. It is a preliminary part of the finished original artwork, right? And don't confuse that with, oh, the pencils are prelims. No, you shouldn't, because we, as you know, Matt, we already have prelims in the hobby, and we don't want to start opening up another can of worms to confuse those two things, right?
Yes.
But it can be said that you can use that word just in discussion to say that the penciled work before it's inked is the preliminary art, which then gets finished by the finisher, the inker, whatever you want to call them. So yeah, you can say that, but let's be careful that we don't start confusing and calling pencil only pages, oh, prelims. No, because that's not.
Sometimes those pencils are only pitch shifted, like they're just darkening, they're doing a contrast, and that's what gets published. Certainly people who are using like a 2H pencil, people like Frank Whiteley, there's no inking, it's just a contrast. But I think that what that raises, and why I asked that question that way, is you should never confuse final published artwork for the most valuable aspect of the artwork that contributes to the page. And so there are all different kinds of ways that the artwork can begin as opposed to what it becomes when it's published. There are a lot of people that sometimes work on 10 different pieces of paper, scan it, put it all together to turn it into one published page. That's difficult for art collectors, right? Because it's hard to make that look good. Yeah. And so that affects its resale value. But if it's a particularly important historic artwork, then that can make it more valuable than even the sum of its parts. So there's a lot of different things. I think we're going to get into a lot of it. I anticipate that Heidjer's going to bring us into some of these areas tonight in the conversation. We'll see.
Yeah, for sure. And good to see you, JC. As always, I appreciate you, brother. I wanted to let you know, I'm curious. Did you mean to say that comic art, for the most part, is production art? But even if you meant to say process, you can say it's production art. It's all production art. And that's another sort of can of worms that can happen only because typically in this hobby, it's when you see like a full page stat, people say, oh, well, that's just production art, right? But the fact of the matter is, as I know that's why you're nodding, Matt, it's because all of it really is production. It's all art created to produce, right? It's all produced to create the final product, which is the published version, right? The comic book, as we call it. But it is technically all production art. It's all art done in the production of comic books. So, so yeah, JC, you got it, man. And first version. Oh, okay. Birth versions. Okay. Before we start, let me just catch up real quick to you guys. First stage art, inker. Second stage art. Yeah, I mean, look, we can call it by however many ways, as long as when the time comes and you're trying to sell some pencil page, don't call it a prelim. That's all. Just use your head.
Just don't call it a cameo.
Yeah. Nikki B, what's up? Just so you know, Nick, thank you very much for rallying the likes. I gave you your promo. I try to do all the promos at the beginning now, so I don't forget. So already did that. So thank you very much. And CJ, the pencils are the songwriter and the Rangers. Nice. Whole new category. The stats are the real published work.
The writer is the songwriter.
Okay, so yeah. So thanks for clearing that up, JC. So no, you meant that it's a process of several talents who've had a hand in it. Yes, yeah, it's well said either way, you know.
Don't you
But
miss
like,
lettering?
what's that?
Don't you miss lettering right on the page?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Except I like the hand on hand
Actually,
drawn.
Yeah.
You know, I prefer the hand drawn stuff than the glued stuff. Only because the glued stuff pops up with age, right? It falls off, pops up, or whatever. You know. Don't call what a comeback, Mike. I've been here for years. Production of printed pages for snotty-nosed kids for 10 cents. That's right. That's what comic books are. Will did a great job filling in for Nick. Good to hear. Jesus. Hey, Jesus, I got a sale next week. Some affordable art for sale next week. So please drop by next week. Good to see you, though. And Marcus, way because I used the space. Okay, yeah, I don't know what you guys are talking about together. It was quicker. Okay. All right. So as I was saying, everybody, we got a few topics to get into tonight, so let's just get right into that with Heidjer. Heidjer, why don't you ready to start us off? And
Sure. So it was to give full due. You know, as like Ruben said, it was a few months ago, and he came to me and said, you know, I've got a topic in mind. He says, you know, I'm calling it "Everybody Sucks. They Wouldn't Know Good Art if it bit them in the butt." And I said, Ruben, you can't do that. You're Canadian. You're too nice. You got a country's reputation uphold. He says, okay. He says, everybody sucks except for Vivian. And I said, no, dial it back, Ruben. He says, okay, Vivian and Karen. I'm like, dial it back, Ruben. So, you know, after further conversations, we got here. And really what it comes down to, and I'm taking the piss out of Ruben right now, just for fun of it. But first of all, the exclamation at the beginning. Tonight is not about telling anybody how to collect or what they collect or how they enjoy what collect. That doesn't matter. And I think we're going to go over a lot of different terms that I think are not quite right for what we're doing anymore. You know, there's been a pivotal shift in dollar signs, and I think that's sort of what got me thinking about this. I've been doing this for, let's see, I started collecting in the early 90s. And when you're spending $10 on a page, you know, it's a hobby. Who cares? Yeah. You know, when you start spending 500, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, not that's what we're about. You see the numbers that you're going, it's not a hobby anymore. Right. You know, and it's I have in very clearly, you know, first of all, I want to say, I'm really glad to have Matt on board here because he I would say is an expert, and I don't mean that disrespectfully with my expert, but I have no clue what I'm talking about. I've always felt this discussion comes from a deep-seated insecurity about my collecting habits. You know, when I started, you know, everybody was already talking how much Coletta sucks inking Kirby, and I had no idea what they were talking about. You know, and I'm not a superhero collector, and I came back to the hobby very, very late in the 90s, and you know, I didn't really collect as a kid. So I came to it, and I'm like, I don't understand what you folks are talking about. I don't have the history, and even back then when we were talking about, you know, which was Comic Art L, you know, had 100 collectors, and when we hit, you know, 1,000, it was like, woo, 1,000 people on Comic Art L. And so it's always been like, well, I'm collecting something very different, and why am I doing something wrong? Because you see all these other people talking about the stuff that I have no idea about, and you hear a lot of folks coming. You know, if you watch the YouTube shows, there's a lot of auction reviews and stuff like that, and it's like watching Top Gear if you're a car person. You know, and he said, like, look at this, you know, Ferrari, you know, that's worth $1 million, and you'll never drive it because there's only 4 and already paid for. This is like, well, I don't have a Ferrari, I have a Toyota. you know, and nobody ever talks about a Toyota. And for the folks that there was one person on Facebook today says, listen, I'm coming in, I'm new to the hobby, you know, what about reasonably priced art? You know, and I still look for stuff that's what the folks in CGC call the Morlock tunnels. Yeah, you know, $500 or less, and getting your enjoyment out of it. The stuff I collect, I'm not going to say how I'm not going to go into my collecting habits per se, but I come a very different perspective from it. I have I would say my collection is less than 10% nostalgic. I've got some pieces. There's things I love. I love Sandman. I love the Spectre. But there's stuff that just kind of grabs me. And I'm going to say a very bad word right now, Liechtenstein. Roy Lichtenstein, it's everybody comes and goes like, he stole stuff and so forth. But there's a reason I think he grabbed it. You get a panel and you grab emotion, you grab a story. And as I forgot who said it before, it's a process. The writer is the songwriter, and then there's the interpretation by the pencil and a further interpretation by the inker, to make up a story. And it fits in a way that's very, very different than a book where you use your imagination, you create the characters, and a finished movie or a miniseries or a TV show where you have all these other people adding their stuff to it. So we kind of sit in a very unique framework there, and each page is unique. There's pages out there, maybe the art isn't that good, but the story's good. And the question is it art? And I know Ruben really, really bristled at that term because he says, you don't want to offend anybody. And I don't want to offend anybody, but, when you start throwing around prices that are in the thousands for essentially what amounts to, and again, no offense to anybody, a piece of paper with some ink or paint on it, you're talking a lot of food or a car payment or a house payment or so forth. What is it there? You hope that it's more than just sort of a warm, fuzzy feeling that you got from when you were a kid. And by the way, I should throw out there, Matt did a really, really good YouTube video on his channel about nostalgia, the value of nostalgia. So go check it out because it's something to think about and not to take away from it.
Or don't check it out because I've already spoken to Matt. I'd like him to kind of regurgitate what he did on that video live with me here.
After this, don't go away. Stay on here. Do not change the channel. But I mean, it's one of those things that you kind of, what is it that we're buying? And you hear a lot of the talk also about, the comic business is going down, their prices are going to go reset. The folks that enjoy Silver Age, Golden Age are dying. They're not. People are not going to care about it. And I don't think that's the case. I think this is really something very, very special that we're looking at, and it's probably the oldest form of storytelling that's out there. And if you look at the folks that if you look at the other thing that you hear a lot in storytelling, why aren't we appreciated as much as fine art? And I don't disagree with it, but Matt's going to school me on this, I'm sure. But fine art is really something new, the concept of fine art. Because a lot of the stuff in the last 1,000 years, if you will, is production art. It's telling a story. You write it, you paint it on the wall. This is, if you look at Michelangelo, he was telling the stories of the day. He painted on the wall, he painted on the canvas, what have you. But it wasn't done for fine art. It was telling a story. So this is in some ways very updated, and maybe I'm not trying to make something out of this is modern mythology. If you will. And again, not saying that what Michelangelo was doing was mythology. I'm not trying to create controversy here, but I think it's more than just the art. It is more than just the story. It is more than just pop culture. It is culture. It is story. It is how we do it. And we've really been told from the get-go. I think we're all sort of in the same age group when we're told, comics are for kids. If even Ray Bradbury, and I love Ray Bradbury, if you read Fahrenheit 451, says we took books away and they gave everybody comic books because that was somehow talking down about it. And if you look at the stories now, it's not talking down about it. You see Persepolis, you see Mouse, you see all these stories that are seriously good stories, and it's a different medium. So I just kind of, this is all the sort of stuff going through my head and kind of going, you hear people talking about, I got this great Byrne X-Men page. Well, that's fine, but why isn't a Byrne Danger Unlimited page? If you're looking for the art, if you're looking for the story, is that enough for you? What is the discussion to have around it? And is there more to it? And I don't know if there is. I think there is. I love it, and when you're sitting there justifying those expenses to your spouse, this is the how-to and how to justify it. And so I'm looking for some good tips here. So
let's dig into that. So I think Well, first of all, you talked about Top Gear, and the idea of you've got like people that are talking about Ferraris. Now, unfortunately, what you often see in this hobby is people that have never been in a Ferrari talking about a Ferrari, or people who have been in, who own Ferraris and sell Ferraris but don't know how they work. And that's a really interesting aspect. There are a lot of people that don't speak in an art language that are in control of the illustration art hobby. Now, when you want to talk about the birth of, we'll say, sequential storytelling, yeah, cave paintings, telling an illustrative story, you're talking somewhere between 60 and 120,000 years ago. But when you do talk about Michelangelo, this is where you really start talking about artists who made a living as artists. That Michelangelo became known in the area of Italy because two families were fighting over who had the best painters painting their portraits into religious iconography to hang in churches, which were guaranteed the most people would see their likenesses. So in that aspect, Michelangelo would be almost more akin to a billboard artist than to necessarily what I think we think of as fine art. And that's a great jumping off point, because so much of art that was looked down upon as somehow less than fine art was transformed by people by Lichtenstein and people like Warhol, who said that this advertisement stuff is as iconic as any of the fine art that we know. Now, when you go back and look at when do we start changing how we look at fine art? When did people start respecting different types of non-representational painting rather representational painting? You're looking at the turn of the 19th and the 20th century. You're looking at pre-Bauhaus era. You're looking at someone writing words on the bottom of a urinal and hanging it upside down and sticking it on a wall, and conceptual art is born. And so where we get in the United States by the time that illustration art gets looked down upon is that follows a steady campaign of decades since the 1940s after World War II, where many of the fine art painting schools were dismantled, destroyed, bombed. Many of those artists were Jews who were sent to death camps. Certainly a lot of the people teaching and instructing on fine painting were no longer living or were completely dispersed by the middle of the 1940s. And so a huge push happens in the United States by Peggy Guggenheim to get behind this new, not necessarily representational art and into abstract expressionism, because we could not compete in the United States with the fine art schools of France, of Belgium, of Italy, of even England. And so there's a shift, and she starts putting a lot of money into education so that they start teaching this new history of art, so that abstract expressionism replaces illustrative, realistic, incredibly technique-heavy work. So we're, in a weird way, experiencing a renaissance of appreciation for representational art vis-a-vis comic book art. And what you said was really interesting, like, that you didn't know, like why people were saying, oh, Coletta's a bad inker of Kirby. But you also said that so little of your collection is actually stemmed in nostalgia. But I think that when we collect comic art, we're collecting the idea of nostalgia as much as we are collecting an individual and personal nostalgia. So that if you buy a page of Batman comic art, that connects all the way back to Detective Number 27. That the history of this character is that rich, that all of you who have any Batman art have Batman art, no matter who wrote it, no matter who drew it, no matter who inked it, no matter who lettered it, no matter who colored it, whether it's a painted cover or a panel page, that you're all part of a fraternity of people that now own a piece of this ongoing, growing mythology that is an American mythology. And so I think that what becomes most important to deep collectors, that once we get below that first level of collecting, we start to get into who do we think did Batman best, or who did Batman first, or who created this character. And all those things become very, very important in why an individual artwork is worth money. but in getting fine art collectors into the hobby, because I have experience with this in having been a fine art dealer, and even like, having the benefit of growing up in my business, coming from a gallery that specialized in what was being called lowbrow art at the time. And then Robert Williams, genius that he is, changed the term lowbrow, which he coined, to pop surrealism. And now all of a sudden you could add a zero onto any price point that you stuck on a wall, because pop surrealism certainly sounds more respectable than lowbrow. And then by the late 1990s, you had a couple of artists who were born of that movement selling their work for hundreds of thousands of dollars, starting to edge in on selling their work for millions of dollars by the early aughts. So it's important to address these different eras and how they have played into what we're now seeing. So when I did the first pop sequentialism exhibition, I had to write massive explanations about each individual page, because it wasn't just this artist, the name of the piece, the price. Because I had to educate people who were used to only getting that information on why this particular artwork, this comic book artwork, was important. And when I sat down and started writing these explanations and talking about why this writer working with this artist becomes so pivotal, because this story wins an Eisner Award. Well, what's an Eisner Award? Who's Eisner? Why is it named after him? You have to go through all this stuff in
an educational process, of course. I mean,
yeah,
the people that are going to walk in there, more likely than not, are going to be a lot of curiosity seekers, right? That, oh, what's this? And they're not really comic art people, right? So,
and you can't fit that all on a wall tag.
But they're tag, right? Story people. That's the thing. Everybody's a story person.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's different about color, because you can take a page, you know nothing about it. And again, this goes to the word balloons and where I think they're important. But I mean, you can get the story and you can get the emotion and you can get a feeling. You put it on the wall and kind of go, this is cool because I'm getting part of the story. Yeah. Regardless of what's there. And that's very different. I mean, I think every piece of art out there tells a story, whether it's old, new, modern, or so forth. It's supposed to evoke an emotion and it's supposed to tell a story to it. And this
certainly
is
narrative art. Certainly narrative art by definition and by design.
But by narrative art, definitely. But even if you look at some of the old masters and so forth, it's a piece of a story, and there's people in there, and they're telling you something. And this is just this is more sequential. It's narrative, but it's the same sort of thing. You can walk in, and pick up a page of comic book art, and it could be the most mundane piece of art. Talk through it again. I love the word balloons. I definitely do. And it gets what you kind of go, I get what's going on here. I don't know who the people are, but you can sense the emotion. This is, if it were in movie, it would, in a TV show or movie, it would be relayed by the actors, raising the eyebrow and acting. But this has to be done via, pen and ink, and get the same over. And so it's very different in that regard. But that's where I think what's really cool about it. And very different about it, and you may have to explain the Eisner Award, so forth. But I think it's a much lower entry point for somebody kind of going. It's more than I'm trying to say. It's more than just, hey, it's the X-Men. It's cool. It's a story and grabs you.
Yeah, the word balloons are a really interesting aspect to why and they were a huge part of that first exhibition that I did. And I didn't realize when I was putting it together that it was really the first modern comic art survey show. And I realized when you write as much as I had to write about 40 different pieces of artwork, I'm like, well, I'm publishing this. This isn't just going to live on a website for a month. Like, I'm going to have to publish this. Scheduled for it to be published so that the catalogs were right there at the art opening for people to look through and get more information about it. Because like I say, you can't fit all that on a tag with a price tag on a wall under a piece. And even just like how to display them became such a thing. And I got really simple with it. And I got glass cut to just a little bit bigger than the size of the piece. And we put it on the wall and put it under the glass. And then when you bought it, you just got the piece. You can frame it any way you want. You don't have to frame it, because I know that most comic art collectors stick them in these books. They don't hang it on their walls necessarily.
Right.
And especially like deep collectors, because you only have so much room in your house.
Exactly.
but it required doing that much work to get it taken seriously as fine art among anybody that wasn't already buying it at a specific comic art auction. The highest price paid in 2011 when we did that show, I think, was, golly, I don't even think the Dark Knight page had sold for $450,000 yet. It was definitely before the McFarlane Spider-Man Hulk cover sold for $660,000. I think the highest sold realized price at that point had been for a book cover, children's book cover, which was being kind of put in the same category, and it was a Tintin artwork, and then that record was beat by another Tintin artwork for like $1 million. Now we're in an industry where Frank Frazetta fantasy art paintings have sold for $12 million. So I mean, yeah, it's a very
not that I don't believe you, but the last I heard was 5+ or something. What went for 12 million?
I think the not the one that
not the Molly Hatchet cover, right? Not that one.
That one's 7, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think there's a sale for a $12 million sale on a Frazetta piece. I don't think it's an auction piece, but that's information that I've picked up. Okay. Yeah, and I believe it. Like I don't think it's wrong. But again, you know, like there's all kinds of artwork that is lost. You know, that so much of early comic art was lost to paper drives for World War II, as were so many early movie posters. Certainly, they were erasing pages and doing new artwork on top of them. You know, and that was a very, very common thing, that they would sort of acetate out the ink and kind of wash it down, and because paper was expensive during World War II. So much stuff was just tossed in the trash.
Well, Matt, this goes back. That practice goes back thousands of years, because even the old masters, hundreds of years ago, you know, most of those people, those artists, didn't make a ton of money selling their fine art.
Right.
And they didn't have, therefore, a lot of money to buy new canvas all the time. Oh, look, I did this old painting a while ago. You know what? I don't like this one that much. I'll use this. I'll paint over it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's why hundreds of years later, some of these museums, these experts are like, oh, they put it under the black light and all these other tools they have these days. And they're like, holy shit, there's another painting underneath this painting. And it's like, wow, fully finished and everything, you know?
There's an African-American painter named Sam Doyle who lived on the Gullah Islands off the coast of the Carolinas. And Gullah culture is kind of its own culture, and they have a really specific accent. It's actually almost more like a Welsh accent than you might associate with the American South and the Southeast. Sam Doyle probably painted about 450 artworks over his life, and he used house paint and roof tin. And so people would go and sometimes take pictures of his work, and then you realize that if it didn't sell in a month, he painted over it. So there's more of a record of his work than the work ever existed. Not just of what exists now, say, but than they ever existed. If this didn't sell, he painted over it. A lot of graffiti artists understand this process because they're constantly painting over temporary work that was never intended for sale. And you see people pulling giant sections of walls out of places because there's a Banksy painting on it.
Yeah.
And you know, and Banksy and his representatives will not authenticate these pieces. They do not want that to happen. And so, like, you have in the fine art world, there's a whole thing about that. There's the same problem in this art world. You know, I had a Vince Colletta page, a romance page, when it was Vince Colletta pencils, and it was attributed to Vince Colletta. I'm looking at it, I'm like, you know, there's a lot of stuff that winds up in Kirby's later work here. And I'm like, now, is this a Kirby page that is being attributed to Vince Colletta? Or did Vince Colletta actually bring more to Kirby's artwork than we give him credit for? You know, like that. Are there elements of this that didn't exist in Kirby's work prior to him working with Colletta that appear in it later? And certainly, you know, inkers always put their stamp on the work that they're producing. And speaking of inkers, I just had a custom commission that I did with an artist who's not very well known, who's very talented. It was an X-Men commission. It was super rare for me. And I wanted to get, you know, an classic X-Men inker to ink it. They're all dead, pretty much, except for Terry Austin. And or their work is just as expensive as the pencilers whose work they do. So like, you got Scott Williams is getting the same pricing that Jim Lee's getting, so like if you go back, like a lot of these really great inkers, Dan Green gone, like these amazing, the people that we grew up reading their comics, and you'd look in a comic and there may be 4 or 5 pencils you'd follow. There were like 2 inkers, that were inking like almost everything in each company. All these guys are gone. The art of inking is very rapidly becoming a dying art form, and that's why I think, when you talk about Blue Line and ink, some inkers today are incredibly talented people, and I want to make sure that I own their work, but I want to know exactly what I'm getting when I buy it. And if someone is putting up a page and presenting it as the penciler and the inker and not calling out the Blue Line, and they know the answer to that, then that's a deceptive practice, and we need to stop that from happening.
But it's funny, man, because the thing is, I'm a big I have a lot of collection from the Filipino artists from the 70s, and I still think they are massively underrated. It's gorgeous art.
Absolutely.
And my understanding is they just kind of roughed it out. I mean, really roughed the pencils, and they went right to the inking. So I never understood that when I started collecting. I started collecting because I wanted mystery and horror art. It's what I loved, and I could not afford EC art at the time. Still can't. But it's I didn't understand what they were doing, but I know I liked it. And at $10 to $25 a page, when I was buying it, that was a steal.
Sure. Oh man, I remember like at Comic-Con in '94 and '95, someone had a table full of that stuff, like all Esteban Maroto, Jerry Teleoc, all the classic guys, and even like a lot of stuff from Dick Giordano, like that were, we'll say like Brave and the Bold pages where Batman was only in one panel, or like tons of Spectre stuff from Adventure, like amazingly a lot of Jim Aparo stuff even, and by Sunday it was like the guy got out a ruler and he put the ruler on the table and he was selling it by the inch. Like you could buy like for $20 an inch, you could buy, like all these pages. And so I ended up writing an article that got picked up by Forbes magazine about investment in illustration and why illustration was at that time I wrote the article, proving to be the best investment you could make for return on investment percentage. So that these $10 Jim Aparo pages from a 1995 Comic-Con table were now $1,000 and $1,500 minimum. So like, that hasn't changed so much in the last 10 years, but the economy's changed a lot. It's still return on investment, except for a handful of artists today who are getting what I think is an inordinately high rate on their work. And I think that's great that they're getting a high rate on their work. I'm wondering if it's, as we say, investment worthy to pay, say, $10,000 or $20,000 for a Daniel Warren Johnson Transformers page. Is that going to sustain over time, or are you better off buying Alfredo Alcala's work? Are you better off buying?
Now we're finally getting more specifically into the crux of price versus value, or value versus price.
Well, let me throw Matt a curveball here, and
sure.
and I'm going to apologize in advance. But what do you think, general, no name attached to it, given the hours that somebody puts in on a page should cost if you buy it? I mean, generic page.
You're saying should. I mean, what is should? Should is automatically a judgment. Should implies that there's a problem with the price and what it's being offered, and that it's even something that can be measured, because you can't just measure based on the work. What you can measure is the cost of a commission.
For the Filipino artist, that's just an insult, honestly, to the artist, given the amount of work that went into it. I mean, very, very simple, even back then, I think.
But I agree. But I also think that that's a fundamental of illustration, that a problem with any art is that it's not built around necessarily an established metric that matters across the board. That what as you said, the character on the page is important. The story element is important. This is what gives things value. That's why I'm thinking, you know, like I said Daniel Warren Johnson specifically, and I think he's a phenomenal artist and I love his stuff. But this run of Transformers, is that going to resonate in 10 years? Never mind in 50 years. You know, and that's why I think right now we're actually seeing appreciation for that Filipino work from the 1970s, because people are like, holy cow, this stuff was not really seen as being as high quality or as important in its day, but now we can measure it. Now we can go back and look and we can see that there's decades of work here. Another thing that people want to know when they're buying artwork is that page isn't a fluke. Like, I don't just like see one piece of artwork from an artist and say I'm going to hire them for a commission, because you don't know what you're going to get. You have to see a range of their work. You have to know that they can draw hands and toes and all that stuff, and not just a bust. You know, like, because eyes and nose and a mouth are pretty easy for almost anybody to draw. And you know, what elevates something is going to be the background detail. You know, whenever I see like these commission things happen ahead of these shows, I almost hive up, because like, if I know who the artist is, yeah, I have no problem saying I'll drop $250 on a commission the size of a trading card, knowing what I'm going to get. But if I don't know and I get something I don't like, I'm going to be so furious, because I'm going to feel like I wasted that when I could have put it towards somebody whose work I know I can get.
Well, but that's also commission versus published.
Sure.
I mean, from most part, I only do published.
Right.
Because it has, for me, it's part of the story. Commission, I can't tell a story. I very honestly, I don't have an idea. This is why I don't do commissions, because it's like I'm not bringing anything to the table.
Yeah, I art direct the hell out of that stuff, and I'm sure that the artists are furious at me. But sometimes they know who I am, so maybe it makes me feel more furious. But you know, like, to that point, I think you're right. I think you're correct. But I also think that over time, that becomes apparent, like, especially with published work, that with a little bit of time, you can look back and you can assess and say, oh my God, I can get this amount of, you know, Alfredo Alcala's work, or Esteban Maroto's work, or San Julian's work, and it only costs this much. And this is better, ostensibly, than this era of work. And even when they did fill-in issues, and maybe those other artists are more well-known. I think if you ask Steve Bissett what he thinks of the work Alfredo Alcala did on the issues that he didn't do, that John Toddleben inked on Swamp Thing, he'll be like, oh, he's a better artist than I am. He might say that, you know, like, and I think that when you, and by technique, maybe if not by actual process, but I think, you know, that when you're buying pages from a published book, you're buying them because you liked that book, probably. But even if you don't know that, in all things being equal, and we see this on that show, right, where people pick 4 pages arbitrarily and like, oh, I would pick this one and I would pick this one. And sometimes they have really good reasons for picking it. And sometimes they sound like a kid in a schoolyard, you know, like that there's not a lot, they just like it because they like it. Yeah. And I don't think there's a lot of I don't think it's interesting to listen to that. I think it's interesting to listen to somebody who has a really impassioned reason for why they like stuff. And, you know, like when I hear Chris Snorek talk about pieces on you know, Comic Art Live, I love the way that he talks about art. I'm not sure if he has an art background, but certainly over the last,
I think he does.
Yeah, and it's coming out, and certainly, and even over the last two years that he's been a regular on the show, that he's getting more specific about articulating what it is, because I think he understands that the audience is now getting a little bit better about understanding that and wanting that type of conversation, instead of like, oh, Hulk smash, you know. And I think, you know, on some of these shows, you just do get the Hulk smash. And granted, there's a certain portion of the demographic and collecting community that's as sophisticated as they are, that, you know, that they, I mean, the nostalgia now for like Marvel's G.I. Joe is mind blowing to me, because that comic was terrible by every metric. You know, Secret Wars was considered a terrible comic by every single metric, but now there's nostalgia because of what that black Superman costume, a Spider-Man costume became. You know, like, so it's like that gets tied up in, and then it's Mike Zeck, you know, with 27 different people inking him as he wasn't finishing the work on time. And, you know, we may never know who the inkers were on some of those pages.
But I mean, if you go back further, I mean, the nostalgia is definitely there for that. And I understand that, having grown up at the time. But when you go back and talking like, you know, Matt Fox and then Fight Comics and stuff like that, none of us remember that, but those prices are going through the roof, and they're cool pages.
Yeah.
So what is driving it? Is it scarcity? Is it the art? Is it the story? Is it all of it? Because it's not nostalgia. Because that's, which is great.
Yeah,
Which
those guys weren't alive, right? Is your point? Those collectors weren't alive when those comics were being
Yeah.
published. Well, I mean, those collectors, the people that are interested in that artwork are probably guys that were comic book collectors, right? And then they started looking around, and they became investment guys. Because let's face it, if you're buying Matt Baker, Matt Fox, Mac Rayboy pages, you don't work at Costco. Like you've got a lot of money
that are buying the stuff. I mean, and unfortunately, the prices.
Yeah. So like when you're buying art in that price range, and even if they got in on, we'll say, the ground floor for that within the last 12 years, $20,000, $40,000, $50,000, right? So they probably were buying these comics and were like, wow, these are certainly scarce comics. Some of these comics don't even exist in 9.8s or 9.6s. That I have the best condition version of this. And it's probably worth more now because a lot of modern collectors are getting more into, they feel, and I spoke about this in my video, they feel that Golden Age is a safer investment. At the end of the day, I don't think that's necessarily true. And I think that as more of these boomers die, you're going to see a lot more of that stuff hit the market. But that they became aware of it, and they're like, this is so different from what I grew up with, from what my experience is. It is the skeleton of this thing that I love. It is a prototype from my favorite thing in the world. And now I'm so into this that I can tell a good Matt Fox page from a bad Matt Fox page. Like, they develop their own expertise within their own specific area of collecting, that's now the throw for them. And they've got a lot of money. I mean, like, I'm constantly surprised by, like, I've met a lot of collectors come in and out of town. They're dropping 20 grand on pages regularly. And I'm like, I know these guys are doing okay. How are they dropping 20 grand, on pages every 6 months? And then I realized, well, if you own your own house and you live in an area where, you're able to pay off, your mortgage a while ago, then your entire paycheck is expendable income. And it's like, so I don't get mad that they can afford amazing things. I'm psyched. But, like, I also think that we've been kind of turned into a kind of hero worship of people who have a lot of money. And you see these people that are extremely wealthy, and they're pulling out these, like, banger pages all the time. And that, to me, is dull too. Like, it's like, well, of course, that cover is an iconic cover. It's the first appearance of Gambit or whatever, whatever. Or if it's the first, cover artwork to Spider-Man 127 or whatever it is, that we all know it's a great page. It's like pointing out at the street and saying, car, dog, tree. Like, there's absolutely nothing interesting about that. Like, what's interesting is talking about why that Esteban Maroto page should be worth 10 times what pages that were published that same month are worth. It's why, the fine artists' work should be more valuable.
Well, and that's, I think that's always what's in the back of my mind is that I've gravitated to a lot to the early 80s, looking at Epic magazine and a lot of the independents and the amazing art that was going on there. And again, as I said at the beginning, this is not to take any away from anyone who loves X-Men or so forth in the first place. If you love it, that's great. Do it. But, I think even in the back of the mind of a lot of these folks, they're selling themselves short a little bit, because you'll hear the people say, oh, when Byrne did this or when Cockrum did that, and so forth. And again, the fact that somebody says, I don't like the way Coletta inks Kirby, and they're giving that thought, there's more there. And if you get away from just the characters and the nostalgia, and so I think maybe I'm giving ourselves a collective pat on the back, and then just to look around a little bit more and sort of saying what you're collecting maybe is more than you give it credit for, than just nostalgia.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at our host, he's sitting in a room full of amazing pulp painting, And I mean, like, the pulp painting stuff, even in the modern era, and I mean, now we're finally seeing the original pulps getting slabbed, and that's going to really change things. I mean, the prices on collecting old pulps are going to go through the roof. The artwork, when it starts to appear, is going to become absolutely in that upper echelon of fine art pricing. You're going to see stuff going for more than Dave Elfgren stuff. I mean, like, it's really going to get expensive. But, Ruben's the way I met Ruben is Ruben was buying pulp paintings for me at La Luz de Jesus Gallery 15 years ago, and he had a great appreciation for an underknown artist named Charles Binger, who did incredible work, is one of the archetypes of a certain type of sort of crime novel cover, and in a way still had like an influence on the Gothic romance paperback guys, but was also a guy that painted movie posters. He did all the Ray Bradbury novels. He did all the Aldous Huxley novel covers. And we even had, he'd done the cover to one of the paperbacks, which is considered widely to be one of the 50 best paperback covers of all time, which was Day of the Locust. He did the original cover art to that, which was a scandalous book in its day and was a scandalous film in its own right decades later.
I wanted to get that one, but it was already sold by the time I found your website, for the exhibit.
Bob Murawski, the Oscar-winning editor, is the proud owner of that piece.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
He also a very deep collector of Charles Binger. I don't think he'd have any problem with anybody knowing that. There's also another famous editor who bought almost all the other pieces that the three of you picked up most of the pieces in those first two shows. But I mean, that speaks to it, because why do you buy that? Because it's incredible painting and it's undervalued and it speaks to what you collect and enjoy. And so I think that there is an aspect of sight unseen, why you like things, why you're led to them. And I think it's also very much steeped in your ability to appreciate good art. That gives you an edge in the long run over value accumulation if other people are fighting over 10th generation X-Men pages from eras that people have no nostalgia for and will never have nostalgia for. So like, when you have a really well-drawn thing, just as when you walk in, if you've ever seen, Village Roadshow, I bought this painting, at the local thrift store, and they're like, well, we don't know exactly who painted this, but we can tell from the era that it's from this particular school of painting, right? So like, and just because they know it's from that school of work, they can assess a value to it and say that this is important. And so that's the same way that fine art collectors, assessors, auction houses are going to start looking at that Bronze Age Filipino horror art, and then the Bronze Age superhero stuff, that it's like, this is of the DC school of the Bronze Age of comic production. And that's how it's going to be looked at in the grand scheme of things. And then in our world of heritage auctions and Comic Link and all these other things, there are going to be people that are specialists within that are going to be able to say, well, I know that this is so-and-so because of this line. And we're seeing this with, the romance comic art. None of that was attributed. Now there's like huge databases dedicated to who did each page, even though none of that was ever listed. That's fans. That's people who collected and got to understand and got to know and learned. And so there's a long run reward in that. The fact that you have a greater appreciation, like you said, Wrightson over Redondo. But Nestor Redondo's an amazing penciler.
Amazing. I remember as a kid, when I first discovered, I was probably 12, and I discovered the Wrightson Swamp Thing stuff, right? And I'm looking through the bins and I'm enjoying it all, right? Looking at it. Well, actually, I guess the first few issues were on the wall, even back then, early 80s. But then I go to the bins and I'm like, oh, yeah. So this went to like 23 or 24 issues. So I was like, oh, Wrightson only did the first 10. Oh, let me see what the rest of the stuff looked like. And I was like, holy shit, this stuff's awesome, too.
Yeah, it's still great.
Nobody cared because like Marcus had shown the sheep symbols there before. Collectors, readers tend to be kind of that mentality, right? That follow the herd mentality. It's like, if all anybody talks about that Swamp Thing series is the Wrightson art, that automatically means, oh, the rest of it is shit. It must be, because nobody talks about it. But it's brilliant. It's fantastic, that Redondo stuff.
Well, he was doing great stuff for Warren Publications in that era, just as Wrightson was doing. When you look at Nestor's stuff for Creepy and Eerie and Vampirella, and then later stuff, like that he was doing in 1984 magazine and all of those, like there's incredible stuff. His use of dark versus light is in some ways better than Wrightson's work of darkness and light, where Wrights and excels was in his actual detail and in his cross hatching. So like, there's all kinds of metrics you can do to compare things. And, all things created equal, if you take the name off it and put some of the pages next to each other, some of those Nestor Redondo pages are better than some of those Wrightson pages. That doesn't mean they're more valuable, because value is different, right? Like the price of something is different than the skill behind it. And this has always been the case. It will always be the case. It's all marketing.
Right. Well, can I just hold you for that thought for a second, Heidjer? It's simply because, you guys have been, we've been having great scintillating conversation for quite some time now, but I've been reserving comments that I wanted to get to, and these go way back already. Yeah. So I just want to get through a few comments that I've sort of saved.
Sure.
And then we'll continue there. So just hold that thought, Heidjer, if you don't mind. So let me see where. Okay, so quickly for you, Mike. You mentioned this. I just wanted to mention that I had intended to do a show like that, although more like 3,000 or 5,000 at most and below. It's a bit more of a range because I find 1,000 and below is a little too low. But I was considering doing something like that. So I don't know. Talk to me if you want.
3 pieces right here. Most expensive piece, $210.
There we go. We'll get that in a moment. From there, I wanted to put up for you, Matt, and you, Heidjer, that Sam Maroney. I don't know if Sam's still there. He wanted to let you all know that this has been so far a great, thoughtful discussion. So that's awesome. Thank you, Sam. Thanks, I appreciate that. And then he said, does anyone buy art that they don't really like for the artist's name or the character's popularity?
Yes, people absolutely do. They buy it to upgrade. Like if I know that I love Jack Kirby, but a Jack Kirby Fantastic Four page is going to cost me the same as, a car, a really, really good car, then I may buy a cheaper one as a placeholder for something I want better or to trade. So, there's also people that will collect characters regardless of who draws them because they want every aspect of the character. So that's definitely a practice.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, and the one that was going to bring up this goes quite far. The artist that people love to hate is Rob Liefeld. And I'm not going one way or another, but people really are very polarized on him. But I dare say that someone like his art, you're going to see that last because he is so polarizing. It was such a different approach to stuff as well. In terms, so you might have somebody buy something that from Rob that they don't really like if they get a good price because they'll use just step up to something they want to. But I think his art's going to last. Price versus value. I think it's going to last.
Remember Barry Bear?
We'll see. Barry Blair, you mean?
Yeah, Barry Blair. The guy did like Elf Lord or something.
Elf Lord? Yeah.
He did these crazy paintings of like I don't know if we can say this. I'm trying to find a way to say this without guaranteeing that you get defunded.
Well, I don't defunded. That would intimate that I actually make money off of this crap. Are you serious?
Get hidden or blocked or something. So he did these like elf twink torture paintings. And it was like, I was like, this is the crazy stuff. And people who bought it because it was the most audacious, offensive, and weirdest stuff. Like the Cock Goblin painting. The Cock Goblin painting was purchased not because it's a great painting. It was purchased because it is so like objectively weird.
Okay, I got to get on to the next comments. I appreciate that though. Thank you. Thank you. I'll take this one really quick. Carl asked, okay, when having art framed, does everyone go all out with UV, glass, double, matte, frame, specialty? So listen, Carl, everybody does whatever they can afford. It's a mixture of how much can I afford? And even if I can afford it, it comes down to, well, how much is the page that I'm framing worth? And so therefore, do I want to spend all that money to frame, right? When it's only costing me, let's say, this much. So it runs the gamut. It runs the gamut.
That the mattes are color, never just black and white.
Uh-oh. Well, mine are bone, which is not white, but and my frames are black. But some people do photocopies too. Like they don't put the actual original
I
art on the
know
wall.
that's a whole other show. Oh my god, I don't even want to go there. But that's
I mean,
yeah.
I'm not going to tell anybody what they can do with their collection. That seems odd to me, and it seems like a potential problem in what happens when you die. And someone gets, someone finds this artwork and they think it's original, and it creates a lot of confusion in the hobby.
That being said, keep it out of the sun. Sun will do damage. You want to get the glass that will protect it. You want to get acid free and so forth. If you're going to frame it, I have stuff framed on walls. I get a lot of enjoyment having stuff on my walls because I can sit there and look at it. I want to make sure it's safe. So however you do
it. I have no direct sunlight hitting anything. Yeah.
CW, good evening. Lovely to see you again. And this is from earlier. It's in terms of the value of something when we were when Matt was bringing up the Transformers pages by DWJ. That is a true statement in the now, right? Like, so at the moment, that's a very true statement. At any given moment in time, that statement makes all the sense in the world. But I think, to Matt's point, it was more about, will that stuff, the newer stuff that costs so much right from the get-go, will that stuff hold that value, let alone go even higher in value 20 years down the road, 10, 50, whatever it is. And that's
especially as that artist's work becomes more common.
Right.
So, and that's the thing is like, Daniel Warren,
Johnson.
Thank you, Johnson. I got too many names here, but he's an amazing penciler, and Do a Power Bomb, I believe, won several different awards, and I think the person or people who own like full issues, and I don't think they've been letting out individual pages, and I think it was probably very smart. I mean, Felix is a very savvy guy. He's been very good at getting top value for all of his artists, and you might say comparatively that he has turned what has always been a buyer's market into a seller's market with respect to the artists that he represents. That there are a group of collectors that he sells to that have a lot of money that tend to buy deep into the guys that he sells. That their market will change if those buyers die or move on to something else. And that's the risk of having just a handful of collectors for certain people's work.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
That's why, whether it's Gagosian or whether it's White Walls or whether it's Serpentine at the very top end of the fine art world, they will qualify a buyer. Like, you can't just walk in because you have enough money to buy the piece, and there's no transparency with pricing. You never see a price tag on a wall in these galleries. There's a lot of reasons for that. Some of it is probably tax evasion, and certainly in material and moving assets secretly. But they also want to find out what you own. So, like, if they're trying to break in new artists, they want to know that you have a Warhol in your collection. They want to know that you have a Basquiat. And therefore, yes, you can buy this lesser-known young British artist of the 1990s that they're now representing as full-body work. And so, like, it's qualifying the purchase, which drives people crazy, right? Like, it interferes with your sense of fairness. Like, how come my money isn't as good as somebody else's? And it's like, because your collection isn't as good as somebody else's. It gets that deep. And so, like, that's not a super common thing in our hobby, which I think is a good thing. It could easily become a thing. Like, if I'm handling an artist whose work is teetering on the edge of pop art, then I may hold it back. Like, if Jim Mafood had never sold any of his work, and I was dealing with Jim as a dealer, I would not sell a single page unless I was selling pages into collections that had Basquiat and important street artists, because that's where I would want his work to be, and that would elevate the price. And then it would bring that price for everything that he did, no matter what. And maybe I shouldn't say this, right? Maybe I'm creating my own problem, by saying this, and that some art reps are going to start doing that, but I don't know.
Well, the other interesting thing is, though, it's also always a supply and demand issue. The thing is, I was just talking to someone at the OAX, and they say you really don't have an understanding how much stuff has been destroyed in the past and doesn't exist anymore. Even from the 70s, that people, and I don't think that's happening now. And this is not to take away from the talent of the people, whether it's worth it or not. But I don't think anything being produced today is being destroyed at all. So I mean, again,
but some of it doesn't exist in a physical form either.
Well,
so, like if you like Sega, you're SOL.
Costume from Miles Morales page that went for 10 grand, which with no word bubbles on it, and I have no feeling for that whatsoever. Saying, but yeah, this is all there is out there right now in terms of physical art. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
but it is an interesting discussion about that.
And I do collect digital artists' work. Like I do have a lot of Bruno Redondo's stuff. Now I also have his physical work, but all of his Nightwing stuff was produced digitally, and so all of those originals, quote unquote originals, are edition 1 APs. Yeah, but but even like Fiona Staples, there's nothing like. She's never made even that available. She's not even selling APs. Like she's just, it's just in her computer. It's in a laptop. I mean, if she were to lose that laptop where she created all that work, she would then have to rely upon a finished file that was used for printing to produce an artist proof to have a physical version of it, aside from when she does illustrations on blank covers. So like, that's the only way you can collect your art. And I think a lot of the business is moving that way, including people who were incredible, analog artists. When you look at, the Joker graphic novel that Azzarello wrote that, oh my gosh, I can't think of his name right now. He's now a digital artist. He did the After Watchmen Rorschach series. He did, the Lex Luthor Wednesday Comics thing. One of the great pencilers and sort of like dark. Like if you collect Vertigo, he appeals to you because there's something a little bit darker about his work. Lee Bermejo. And
I love Lee Bermejo stuff.
He's now digital.
Yeah.
Same thing with Gary Larson. If you all want strip art, he's come back there and said he's found his passion. You're going digitally; it's easier for him. But
Yeah.
All right. To your point, right? Doesn't that make analog work more valuable? Doesn't that now represent a scarcity, a rarity, a difference in how the production has changed? Doesn't artwork
potentially going forward?
Sure. And as we start to look historically at things, if we're going to say with everything else created equal, what will elevate the price point? Well, text written directly to page will outrank text on word balloons, which will outrank no word balloons at all. I see a lot of people in the digital lettering era producing their own lettering to pop onto their otherwise original artwork. Sometimes on a sheet, sometimes directly on the art, with that acid-free, like sort of Elmerish glue pen. So that's an interesting aspect to things.
For sure.
So, Ruben, we'll let you get a word in. Go ahead.
No, what would you say?
We'll let you get a word in. Have at it.
Oh, I appreciate that. Actually, no, nothing. I was just going to say, so are we good? Do you want to segue into the other things that we wanted to... Huh?
You want to segue into the actual show?
Yeah, the actual show, exactly. Yeah, we have a few different topics we wanted to cover. I don't even know, did we really cover price versus value all that much?
No, I don't think so.
I think topically, but I think that's the thing. Like it's you can do a whole show just on it.
No, for sure.
And then. But I mean, like, here's the thing that we talked about this a little bit before the show, Ruben, and I think it was before you got into the waiting room, Heidjer. But one thing that you don't see a lot is posted prices, right? Like, and this is we also don't see posted rates. So I'm also a member on Facebook of like a artists and writers connecting group, and I wanted to post a video about like how you should approach artists, but also artists what you should know. In presenting your work, it's like be transparent about what you charge, and you'll book work. Hey, Lee was just in Vegas. I missed him yesterday.
Oh, nice.
But,
wow.
It just didn't work out. But you know, I think when artists post prices, they're afraid that they're going to be lowballing. But the truth is that they're already working for that amount. You know, so if it becomes impossible, you raise your rate, and if your work is good, people are going to pay it. It's always only favored the publishers to not declare rates. Now, as collectors, you know, I think there's two things happening, right? Like most collectors have spouses or partners who aren't 100% on board with them being collectors. We'll put it kindly, right? We'll put it kindly. And so they don't want to be 100% honest about what they're paying. And everybody wants other people to think that they got a bargain. You know, so they're not necessarily open about the prices that they pay on stuff. That helps us as collectors to assess whether or not we approach somebody for a commission. Like if I think that somebody's commissions cost $3,000, that's going to stop me from probably hiring them for a commission. I'm not in the I'm going to pay you $3,000 for a commission level right now. But if I know I can get something, if I had an idea in my head that it's that much because I've seen their published pages go for that much, and then I can figure out that they're selling work for $750, I may absolutely hire that person for a commission. And that's a whole different conversation about, you know, commissions are never going to be worth as much as published art. It's unprovenanced. If you're really kidding yourself that you're not an obsessed, foolish collector like the rest of us, and you really think this is an investment that is going to be valuable, then you really shouldn't be buying commissions, because commissions stay at that price until the artist raises their price point. You know, like, and so there's that weird twilight, right, between an artist has to charge more for a commission because they're not doing what they want to do. They're doing what you want to do, and you should pay them for that. So that, you know, that's a whole conversation I've had with artists in the fine art world for years.
Well, I want to throw in there also. I really, and I know, given the amounts that we're talking about, investment comes into it. But when you start talking investment, hobby goes out the window. Because this is no longer kind of a hobby, and if you really love it, I have a problem with the investment side as well. But then again, if you're spending 10, 20, 30, $100,000, I mean, okay, maybe you can blow it, and that's fine. But it's not something that you just kind of at the same time, you know. So it's,
but that's scalable. Like, you know, $10,000 for them may be like $200 for us.
Yeah. No, it's true, but it's I don't see this as a hobby anymore either. You know, it's I think I don't know what the word is, but a collector.
Business. It's a business.
Yeah,
it's an expensive hobby, that's for sure. I mean, what can you say about it? It's not. I mean, listen, people ask all the time, like, or at least point out the fact that, well, the average age of the collectors in this hobby are in the sort of 43 to 57 range, you know, 40s and 50s on average. And you wonder why. Well, yeah, it's an expensive enough hobby to where it kind of takes until you're in you hit your 40s so you can finally start affording this type of stuff, you know.
Well, but I mean, that goes again to the price point, price and value. If you want to step in and you know, I talked to collectors at this last conference that, you know, they're never going to be able to afford the page that they want, which is it's really kind of sad, you know. And it's not even a top tier page, you know, like a cover or something like that. But you know, it's how do you get those satiate that want, if they're looking for a published page. Maybe it is I have a beautiful 2-page Mike Dringenberger splash, 2-page, well, that's not splash, but 2-page spread from Enchanter. I'm not going to pay the tens of thousands for a Sandman page, but it's beautiful, and I got it for $70 on Heritage, you know, before the pandemic. You know, it won't pay for $70 anymore, but still, I mean, is that good enough? It's a great page. I love the story and so forth. And you see his artistic chops, and it tells a story. It's not Sandman. So low price it's great. I think it's a great value. Is that good enough for most collectors?
Can I just say really quickly, not having anything to do with the discussion at hand, there's about 12 to 13 of you currently watching this right now. And I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind, please Even if you're not enjoying what you're listening to, can you please just click that thumbs up button you see right below, so right around here, maybe an inch below my finger here that I'm pointing to. There's a thumbs up. Just click that, please. It's not asking a lot. It's just a button to click on. It's not going to get me any money. I would really appreciate it. There's about 12 to 13 of you that are watching right now that haven't done so, and I'd appreciate it. And my two wonderful guests who do this for free also would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I already clicked when I came in.
Back to our regularly
mine too.
scheduled
I clicked
chat
on the phone. I noticed, and you highlighted them too. Hoarder's Hide had written, that commissions.
Yeah, I'll put that back up there.
Yeah, they lose 25% the second you take possession of. That's not true.
That's not true.
They maintain the price of what that artist charges for commissions until they go up. Most artist commissions get more expensive as their time becomes more of a premium as they book more work. So it does go up, but it doesn't go up in the same speed or scale or exponentially
the same way. Yeah.
Like all of a sudden an omnibus comes out and, Joe Bennett's Hulk work costs 5 times what it used to cost. So it's not as connected. It's also less provenanced. So, but for instance, I bought I think for $600, I bought a really quick Dave Stevens sketch of Captain America from Albert Moy. And a year and a half later, I sold it for $1,500 or $1,600 because who the hell can afford a Dave Stevens published piece?
Yeah.
But $1,200, $1,500 for a Dave Stevens sounds crazy cheap. Even a simple, stupid Captain America drawing, not a character he was particularly known for. So when an artist dies, that affects things drastically as well. But as far as calculable or more calculable, because we're talking about esoteric here, right? Really, is that provenance equates to value. And like I said, when I wrote that study that got picked up by Forbes 15 years ago or whatnot now, that it's held true that the rate of accrued value to published illustration is so tied to nostalgia, and nostalgia is an ever renewable resource. So there's always a new generation getting into nostalgia, and not always their own nostalgia. Sometimes their grandparents' nostalgia, sometimes their parents' nostalgia. So it's a renewable resource. So you can always count on someone rediscovering the past. And what I touched on in the video that Heidjer was talking about is that we don't give enough value to nostalgia, generally speaking. We tend to look at things and say, one of the examples I used is that if you buy something for $10 or for $100, and a year later you sell it for 10, you can't just say you lost $90 because you got a year's worth of enjoyment out of it. And that enjoyment only costs you $2.27 a day, which is less than a cup of coffee. Now, by the other metric, if you buy a stock for $100 and in a year you sell it for $1,000, $1,000, or $10 to $1,000, again, it's like, well, you only made $2.27 a day and it gave you no enjoyment. It probably gave you stress because when you look at investment things that we think overtly as investments, you worry about them. They are front of mind. They make you nervous. They cause you illness. But when you feel like you can treat something that you love as an investment in your own happiness, if you start looking at it that way, then it makes a lot more sense to spend a little bit more money on stuff, maybe not a whole bunch more on stuff, and understand that you're already getting value out of it. That then, if you get anything back on it, is a bonus.
Well, you mentioned one interesting point, and I agree with what you're saying. It's just sort of kind of funny when we did a remodel years ago, and the house we owned before, and kind of going, are we going to get 2 years out of this bathroom when we remodel? And we did. It's fine. Then even if you sell it, if you're going to get enjoyment out of it. But the one word that comes up, and this has kind of been a little bit of a head scratcher, is provenance. And that's a big one now also. And again, the price versus value discussion, especially when people slap some trade dress on a prelim and say unpublished cover or something like that, which happens more and more. And
People do that, Heidjer? Wow.
Yeah, and they wind up on eBay and stuff like that. But I mean, you see enough fakes on eBay and stuff like that. You know, the whole provenance question. I mean, again, makes me a little gun shy on getting sketches off of eBay and stuff as well. If it's a published page, and even that's starting to be be an issue where people taking selling the pages. They cut out the full size pages off of the artist edition, saying original art and so forth, and suddenly you get a copy of something. So I mean, the provenance issue is a big deal as far as I'm concerned. How do we address that?
Happy wife, happy life, I'm told. So
apparently, please hit that like button. How many likes? How many do you guys see? Because I'm not seeing anything updated.
But you mentioned something really important too, and there is an element of what keeps comic art at a certain price point that doesn't seem to affect the fine art world, and it's fraud, right? Like that there's an element of not knowing, because now it's so easy to produce. I've seen people bring in pages and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that I know who owns this actual page, and it ain't this person that just brought it in to show to me. And it's in a frame, so you got to pop it out of the frame in order to even examine it and look at it, with a loop, and then get in and see if you can see the print moire pattern on it. Now printing is so good that's really, really hard to see, and especially now with paintings, it's even harder with paintings. There are some artists that use an element of printing within their painting that is causing some people to cry foul. And it's like, hey, look, it's still painted, but they're doing some kind of digital compositing. They're doing an output, or they're doing a kind of shadow boxing, and then they're painting on top of it. If they're like upfront about that being part of their process, then I don't think that affects the long-term investment value. If they're being sneaky about it, then it's fraud. It's by its very definition fraud. And there's a lot. I used to see someone bringing in like Kirby pages to an art gallery that I knew that was in Burbank. And I'm looking at these and I'm like, I've seen a lot of Jack Kirby originals. I was at his house, was buying stuff from him with cash, taking 3 buses from Hollywood out to Thousand Oaks, holding gigantic pieces on the bus, as people are like, what are you holding there, kid? And you're freaking out. And there's a lot of notes on those pages. Jack Kirby made copious notes on those originals. And I would see stuff that was just a little too clean. And I'd be like, I don't know if those are actually Jack Kirby's, and back then I would have even, and I would say that still today, it's like, I don't know that I have enough tools to be able to do the research on this, to be able to say this is in fact what it claims to be. And because, as you say, so much art was destroyed, that a smart fraudster could go back and look and say, well, this page has never appeared on the market before. I've never seen it, and reproduce that page as a, popped out into existence original. It's tough. There's new people getting into the hobby every day that don't necessarily know what to look for when it comes to spotting originals versus fakes. And then there's a lot of confusion about, how to age pages that aren't published. Like I have a Jerry Robinson page, that has all the back. It was a prelim for early Batman, and it's retelling the origin of Robin. And then in the back, it's got all this other stuff that was never intended to be printed, including an alternate origin for Robin that has a clown in it. And it's like a prototypical Harlequin type playing card Joker on the back of like a 1939 piece of artwork that can absolutely be aged to that era. It's the right ink, it's the right page. It's even got a little bit of like mold on the paper, which gives it, helps in the provenance. But there's going to be people that are like, well, that's not the Joker. And it's like, well, we don't know, but we do know is that Jerry Robinson claimed he created the Joker, that he had an idea for creating this character, that it appeared 2 months before, Robin appeared 2 months before the Joker. We know that that Robin is called Robin because of Jerry Robinson. The character, he was still almost never credited for helping to co-create. While he was still alive, I tried to get him that credit. It's still been elusive. Occasionally, DC will throw his name on the thanks list, but they don't necessarily say featuring characters created by Jerry Robinson. Certainly doesn't say that in the Titans opening credits. And so, like, I've been trying to make a case for this artwork for years. And there's a lot of people that they just think they know stuff, right? Like they just think they know. Like, well, I know this because I think I know this, as opposed to, well, I know this because I know this. And that becomes an element that is conjecture, and we can say that that's conjecture. And I'm not going to say that it's the very first image of the Joker. I'm going to say it helps prove Jerry's claim that he came up with the idea for the Joker, and that to me is important. Whether some other people like, well, if the timing works out on this precedes the very famous Harlequin drawing of the Joker, and it would precede it. So then that becomes not only possibly the first prototype of the Joker, but the fact that the Joker was intended to be part of Robin's origin, and he never was. So
this
that's historic.
Well, so Matt, how do we prevent, if you were to sell it, doesn't sound like you ever want to get rid of it, but let's say you were to sell it, or
everything has a price.
Everything has a price,
the kidneys have a price.
At some point, it winds up in your estate. It would stop from going to an auction house or so forth and saying, first appearance of the Joker by Jerry Robinson, and sort of saying, and having that going there, because as soon as it hits that auction, suddenly it has potentially fake provenance, just like a unused prelim for whatever.
Exactly. No, this is there a safety net in place? Like for me, like I've got notes that are in the same container as this thing. Whether someone were to choose to discard that and write their own thing on it, they can do that. And I mean, and it's always going to be speculative, but it's still a very important piece of comic book history. So is it because it's a prelim, from an era where there's almost no prelims exist. There's a set that they came from, actually from Canada. And, that I saw that it was attributed to, George Rousseau's, who was Jerry's inker at the time, but you look at the pencils and it's not George Rousseau's. So, it's like it's this stuff that you can look at that we have, enough expertise to be able to look at and make judgments about. But again, like what someone wants it to be is what that higher price dictates. So if it were to go to auction and you have two people that have a ton of money that start just, I want it $1 million. I want it $2 million. I want it $3 million. It can get up there. Or those people aren't there and it hits the open market with a $1 starting bid at Heritage and it reaches $6,000. I mean, like you have no control over that if you don't have, a baseline for it. My thing is I would want it to be explained what it is, what it could be, but not say that it is anything that it can't be proven that it is. But auction catalogs frequently say things that are incorrect. Heritage in particular, I've sent them tons of emails about stuff that I've seen on the anime side where I'm like, that's fugazi, like that is not real, or you've got this listed as something and it's something else, or you send them something and then they don't even put the information you've given in the catalog. And so it ends up going for less. So there's really not a tremendous safety net that protects against bad information becoming the only information. Published provenance is the only way around that, but you still got to prove that.
Well, so let's take it back to make sure that Ruben doesn't blow a vessel somewhere, and take it back to the price versus value thing. What can we tell if I'm coming into the hobby today and I see something I see something sold for an artist, and then next week I see it on a sales show for twice the price, or this is an EBS. How do you get price versus value? I mean, how do you educate somebody who's coming into the hobby on this?
Well, I suppose if something is doubling twice the price in a week, the first person could have gotten a great bargain, and maybe they did, or they got a little bit of a bargain and now they want to make a lot of money on it, and someone will either take them off the hook at that price or they won't. And so it's hard to say that something is or isn't worth it if you want it, because we're talking about unique things. We're not talking about, like 2 pages in the same book are still 2 individual pages, and so if you want the page that's on the right, not the page that's on the left, then the page on the left is a consolation prize, even if you get it for half of its value, and the page on the right is worth whatever you're willing to pay for it because you want it. Like that's what makes nostalgia such a powerful drug. you know, that it gives you good feelings. I mean, it causes dopamine. You know, it'll keep you, nostalgia will keep you alive longer. You know, it creates chemical reactions in your body that make you live longer. Smiles create like, even if you don't mean to smile, just smiling like a lunatic will actually, it helps you. Like, it actually causes your brain to think that you're happy in like micro doses that create little micro doses of dopamine and other really good brain chemicals. So like you know, if that page that you want comes up and there's 3 other people that want it as bad as you do, you got some decisions to make, you know, and it's going to go to the person with the most resource.
Right, and you know, the question again is that how do you? Well, I don't know what convince is like. Is it worth having discussion then? You know, again, burn Next Men page. Oh no, I'm not saying doing Next Men. Let's go burn Silver Surfer page versus a burn X-Men page. You can't afford X-Men, but you get a Silver Surfer page. Is you know, price versus value. You know, still cool page.
Burn 80s, burn 2000s. You know, it's a very different price point in that stuff. You know, if especially if you're not talking Superman stuff. So like, you know, there's a page that's on, it might be on Comic Link now, which is this beautiful burn. It's either a cover or a splash, and it's not classic burn by any stretch. I mean, it's not his 1970s X-Men work. It's not his 1980s Fantastic Four or, you know, his late 80s Superman stuff, but it's still a really, really nice page. Oh, it's got the Black Widow. It is 70s work. It's a Marvel team up cover, I think, or a Daredevil cover. It's a Daredevil cover that has the Black Widow on it. And it's great. And I think it's for sale, and I think it's inexpensive. We'll see where it gets. I mean, like, it may end up going for a tremendous amount of money, but right now it seems like a bargain. But again, you know, we know this. Why? Because we know what other burn stuff sells for. If you don't have a record with which to refer to look and see what something is sold for, then you can't really make a judgment that isn't an emotional judgment about what you would pay for it. And I think when it comes to unique things, it's better to regret spending a little bit too much than lamenting the thing that you lost, you know. And I have a story that I used to tell about a pair of sneakers that I'd been shopping. I bought 3 pairs of sneakers, and I walk into this specialty shop, and they've got these Yohji Yamamoto Adidas that have like the Swarovski crystals that spell out the Y and then the 3 lines. But I just bought 3 pairs of shoes, and guys, we don't buy a lot of pairs of shoes. Like, it was like $210 for this pair of sneakers, which was a lot of money for sneakers at the time. And I was like, I can't justify it. And I left. And 2 weeks later, I went back and I was like, do you still have those sneakers? And they just laughed at me. They're like, are you crazy? They're like, number one, those sneakers were in your size. You realize there's probably only 12 pairs of that sneaker in your size. And I was like, and it was only $210. I was like, you're never going to find them again. Just give up on it. And I was like, I will prove them wrong. And I went to every like high-end sneaker shop in New York City, in Chicago, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco. Finally, in Barney's of New York, I found a pair that was 2.5 sizes too big for $575. And I almost bought them. And then I stopped myself and I'm like, you lost.
You can probably get there's some brand new golden high tops on the market.
Yeah, with a T on them. Yeah. No, thank you. No, thank you. Talk about worth less the second you bring them off the lot. But yeah.
There are people here from both sides of the aisle, everyone. Let's just be...
and those are sold out too. Those sneakers are sold out too. So, you know, even if I wanted them, I can't have them. So, and I do not want them.
They are tacky as fuck. I'll say that.
Which there's something to be said for that, you know, like if you want the tackiest, you know, thing, I mean, there's one home for you. It's that pair of sneakers. But like the point being that like it's much easier to justify overspending than it is to understand loss. But there's a metric for that, but only you know that metric. Like I have a different metric for it than you have, than Ruben has, than CJ has, than Carl has, than Karen has. And so like we all have an idea about why we want the thing that we want. And we know that there are other things that we want. And we know that we have limited resources to the degree of what our expendable income is.
So let's take nostalgia out of it then.
Sure.
what should you be looking at in the for price versus value then? You know, I mean, if I bought a burn page from Danger Unlimited, which came out in the 90s. It's a fun little page, great detail to it. Let me take it away from burn. I bought a right at the beginning of the pandemic. I bought a Perez page from CrossGen. I know nothing, and it's just a brilliant little page with lots of just detail on it. It's like, it's a cool page. I know nothing about the story.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, you know, I know Perez. I have nothing by Perez, you know, and it's a cool page. No feeling to it whatsoever. You know, how do you make that judgment where it's too much for that page?
So true. There is a sneaker haunting my past. I did finally have to kind of bury it. You know, like I said, when I realized, and actually I take it back. It wasn't I think it was $700 for that pair. That was too big.
Woof.
And I was like, I can't do this. It's like I've lost. I had to concede my loss, my failure, and move on. But what you said is really interesting. So, and Perez is a really good example. But Perez is a really good example because everything's great. I mean, honestly, the earlier Perez is the only Perez that's less interesting to me. Like the Deathlock stuff, I think is less interesting Perez, but that's the first Perez. So there's value to that. You know, I love Teen Titans specifically because I love Robin, and, you know, he created Nightwing, even that stupid disco costume. But, you know, it's like, but I love it. You know, Ruben's heard my theory a million times. I'll repeat it here. We are all Robin. We are all young people trying to come out of the shadow of an older parental figure to become ourselves. And we, like he, have no superpowers. All it took was, you know, being orphaned and being adopted by a billionaire, and poof, we could all be Robin. The most probably possible. Yeah. God damn it. If only my parents had died, my life would be different. You know, poor me. Yeah, my parents were alive, and I didn't get adopted by a billionaire or endangered in my youth to fight crime. But Perez is great because his level of output remained relatively steady. So it wasn't like he went through like a super productive era and then a less productive era. The work was always top notch. So all of it is of a pace. It just really becomes, okay, there's a baseline for Perez. We know what that is. You can add up everything and divide by however. You can remove, say, Teen Titans, which would be elevated. You can remove Avengers, which would probably be that other, you know, really prime area. Now everything else is on the same pace. So what you're looking for is how many characters are on that page, how detailed is the background. The same things that make a great Perez page make a great Perez page no matter what's on it, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's how you assess the value of it. And so when you've got artists who are maybe less detailed in their backgrounds, it becomes a little bit harder to gauge. I had a page from Infinity, the DC series that McFarlane drew. And I had the page that had, you know, 1, 2, 3 panels and then one wide panel at the bottom. And it was this monster that looked a lot like Spawn years before Spawn. That's the page from Infinity you want. You know, like that's the one you want. I don't own it anymore. I sold it to Anthony 15 years ago, probably. And I'm sure he flipped it to Felix for 10 times what he paid me for it. But I was happy with the amount of money I got for it versus what I had paid. And I knew the next person would be happy because there was no Spawn artwork on the market at that point. Even the Spider-Man stuff was super, super rare. I'd never seen any of it up for sale. And you know, there was this idea that that was the pin, like McFarlane was that pinnacle at that time, like of the modern creators. If you wanted to be a baller, you could say, I've got a McFarlane and throw that down. And you put that next to a Coyote page. Oh my God, you won the contest. Like, cause if that's all that's out there, you know, you won. And the Batman stuff, of course, is fantastic. But so that's how I think how you assess that. You have a baseline, you have a way of looking at what other things have sold for. The stuff is fairly easy to track. And then you create an aggregate. You add them up and you divide by however many numbers you put into it. But don't scale that to the cost of a Teen Titans page. Don't scale it to the cost of an Avengers page. Look at all the work that he produced, and then you start leveling up by how many characters, how much is covered, what the background is, and then you'll arrive at a good rate. And then you'll be able to look and be like, well, considering the rate of increase that everything in the hobby is seeing in, say, 2020 or 21, that paying what people paid for stuff was a good idea in the market at that time, because it was every indication that the market was continuing to go up and up and up. So it's only after a market collapses that we start to say, oh, well, maybe I paid too much for this. But as I said, in that other video, it's like, look at Edge of Spider-Verse #2, the first appearance of, Spider-Gwen. Some people paid $2,000 for that in 9.8 during the pandemic. Now it's going for about $900. So if you buy that for $900 right now and hang on to it for the length of time that you have a mortgage on your home, or the amount of time that you would leave, that you'd be putting money into a CD account or any kind of long distance rate saving accounts, you're talking 20 or 30 years. Is there any metric by which we can measure in a reality where civilization hasn't completely collapsed, where that comic isn't worth $3,000? We know how many comics that were made of that. That is a much rarer comic book than the first appearance of Wolverine, a much rarer comic book than the first appearance of Miles Morales even. I mean, like, when you look at that intelligently, I mean, you're only talking about top condition, 9.8. So like looking at just those top conditions, that's still going to be a good investment on a timeline that's long enough. There isn't really in reality where it all falls off the cliff unless, I mean, if that happens, you're going to have bigger things to worry about than the cost of your comics. It's going to be the cannibals next door. They're going to eat you alive. I mean, it's honestly...
The zombie apocalypse.
Or, some kind of a massive collapse of civilization where human flesh becomes more important than, anything else. But, I digress. That we can look at these things and we can see that on a long enough timeline, most of these things are going to retain value. And that other video that I had made was a response to someone saying that you have to be, you can only buy Golden Age because it's rare. And I'm like, look, you don't know the buying habits of millennials. We do know now, because there's this weird idea that a lot of people have that all millennials are broke and live in their parents' basement. And the fact is, now, like post-pandemic, millennials are doing really well. Like they have higher paying careers at their age than millennials had at their age. They were wise to save that money and live at home while they paid off their student loans. And now they have a tremendous amount of expendable income. So they're also big fans of like making their worth. So they understand paying somebody else their worth. They understand that people who have a talent deserve to be paid for that talent. Millennials actually tip well. Millennials, I think, tip better than the two generations that precede them.
Out of curiosity, just in the interest of going off on tangents, which we often do on my shows, what is considered, what would you guys say is considered a good tip at a restaurant in the United States of America?
20% is expected.
20%.
Okay.
Unless they really suck, and then you can.
Okay. I just
if it sucks, take a $10 bill or a $20 bill and walk up to the restaurant manager and give it to them and say, that was the worst effing service I've ever had in my life. Then they know that you're not just cheap. Then they know that you were willing to tip, just not that person. And then, they'll give you whatever you want. So that's something to bear in mind.
Okay. Because I see, look at that. Look at this. I see 20%, 20% plus you guys, 20%. I just want to make it clear that it's probably the same thing all over North America, Canada, United States. I've always given 20. Marcus gives 15. And I say I always give 20, but I always feel like I gotta say, even though I give it, I don't give it happily. I'm always pissed off that I got to go and give 20% to the cost of my food. Like, it makes me not want to go out, but I still go out. But like, I really hate it. Well, I wish we could adopt the American, the European way of doing things.
The healthcare and all the other stuff to the patrons, basically, is what they've done.
Yeah. There's the history of tipping is very based in racism. That you would not tip a white server in the earliest part of the 19th century, the later part of the early part of the 20th century, late part of the 19th century. You would tip a worker of color with the understanding that you knew that they were getting paid nothing and were working only for tips. There's a lot of service industry jobs that, depending upon what state you're in, allow a lower wage because, yes, we are paying the rest of that wage. That the people who are patrons are paying that wage. It's garbage. It needs to go away. A lot of restaurants now in California, some restaurants here in Nevada, a lot of restaurants in New York are doing away with tipping. They're just paying their workers a decent wage.
Okay, because I was gonna say that's the only way to do it, right? That's really the only way to do it. Otherwise, you can't get the employees in, right?
Yeah.
I just don't see it becoming widespread, to be honest. And Mikhail, he's right. Tipping in North America is a disaster. I don't know about you guys. I'm assuming it's probably the same because, our countries are about as identical to each other, our way of living as any two countries can be. But like over here, shit, it's gotten so out of control. Like you'll go anywhere. You can go to a convenience store. Forget the restaurant, a convenience store. And then you want to pay with your, let's say, credit card or debit card. So they hand you the whatever you call that thing right there on the with a wire or whatever. Okay, you punch in your PIN number, right, and then you tap your card or whatever. But you can't just tap your card. They've got it programmed so that it says, let's say the total is like $10.76. It says okay, so you press your okay, and then it says like 18%, 20%, 25%. Like, and they stand there looking at you. Like the minimum wage employee stands there because they want to see if you're going to tip or not. What the hell is up with that? Like,
there's also a big question, I think, of whether or not the employees even get that tip that you leave, or whether it's are they pooling their tips?
Exactly. I don't know,
because it's impossible to figure out if it's going into a machine. I usually give cash tips rather than using the machine. And so if I'm not going to give somebody a cash tip, I'm not going to give them the tip on the machine. And that really means that I've, that's a fast food restaurant maybe, or it's, even here, like, you go to the grocery store and you do your own checkout and the computer asks you if you want to leave a tip. I'm like, who? The computer? I'm tipping the computer now? And then you do your own checkout, and then there's somebody up front checking your receipt, to see if you paid. And it's kind of like, I don't know how I feel about that. It's a little silly. But yes, that was a segue.
That's what a segue. Okay, we get back on track now. Shall we?
This is Ruben doing market research whether you can have a tip on his original art sales is what that's what.
You know what's funny? My website is programmed so that there's a function where you can, like, when I send an invoice to you, if I invoice you for a piece of art,
you can donate.
Yeah. Oh, no. Literally, it says add tip. Yeah. It's like I would never in a million years dare to ever do that to somebody. Like, shut me down right now. Why don't you? It's like, yeah.
Square, I think it's automatic. There's a couple of different payment processors that they just build that into everything, and you have to go in and literally change, how it does that. So, it is a bit of a disaster.
Tempting Toys is telling us that on Frontier, on the airline, they're asking for tips on the payment pad for what?
Well, they got to pay for the fuel.
Your extra luggage, like your upgrade.
Or your luggage you get there? Come on.
Dan says that he tips because in Pennsylvania, minimum wage is $11 an hour and people need to live. Shit, it wasn't that long ago that it was way less than $11 an hour. Yeah. And I get what you're saying. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Here in Austin, in Texas, cashiers and stuff like that again, $17 an hour now.
Yeah, wow. The
cashiers and stuff like that. Yeah, in most fast food places.
That's cool. That means they can actually afford to live in Austin.
Yeah,
that's a pretty.
And you need them. They need to be able to live there, else who's going to be your cashier? I mean, the thing about why I understand why there's resistance to a national minimum wage, because different areas have different economies and different economic realities. And so that needs to be taken into consideration. So when people in California can't believe that people in West Virginia make $5.75 an hour, they also can't understand that a house costs $20,000, so things are relative.
Good night, honey.
Good night, Vivian.
Night, Vivian.
They're all wishing you a good night, honey. So Or okay, it's still too low, says Dan, or augmented to have a card reader. I don't know. Shake Shack has tips. 20% inflation in the last 3 years. Yeah, but we're all suffering from that. It's not just the people making a low wage. Like everybody's, like here, I mean, I'm sure it's probably the same thing all over North America, but like an average like fast food meal, like the cheapest fast food, shitty fast food crap you can get. It's like $15 for like a sandwich with a side, which is typically a fry, let's say, and some shitty little drink. Like $15 for the shittiest fast food. Like what? What happened to $5 meal deals at McDonald's?
And where he lives, with extra cheese curds and gravy.
Poutine. Yeah, baby. But listen, David, pay people a decent wage. But again, it's easy to say when you're talking about corporations that are, like multi-billion-dollar corporations. It's another thing when you're talking about small businesses that, like, if I've got a small business, like a convenience store, let's say, for a convenience store, $11 an hour is kind of more than enough.
Yeah.
Like believe me,
I mean, it depends.
You have multiple employees.
It depends, because
profit margins are really pathetic at convenience stores. Let me tell you, for most products. Like,
I get that. You're talking like even at a bodega, and I think most bodegas are family owned. But if you live in New York City, you need a job that affords you to live in New York City, and everybody else needs convenience stores. So they need people to work at those convenience stores. So if it costs a fortune to live there, you either have no convenience stores and you're getting everything flown in by drone, or you have to pay people enough that they can live there, because what person is going to do a 2-hour commute for an $11 an hour job? Nobody. It's a terrible quality of life. So like it's all in scale. Like it really depends. All economy is local. So like it really depends on what your cost of living is in a given area. So like when you're in San Francisco and it costs you $30 to do your laundry at the corner laundromat, that's because that parking lot could easily be another apartment building where they could charge $3,000 for a 10 by 10 foot room.
Right.
So, like these all affect you in different ways. I mean, this is a whole other conversation.
No, for sure. All right. So do you want to, Heidjer, your show? Do you want to touch a bit on either?
Well, this is the highbrow show here. We're talking economics and all kinds of stuff. Come on.
So I was just gonna say, would you like to touch on either of the, character versus artist? Are you a character collector or an artist collector first, or would you like to touch upon the whole, which I think is kind of more what you were really, venting about with me privately, nostalgia or aesthetics? Does it always have to be about nostalgia, right?
I mean, I think it's all part and parcel. And again, when I started, I always found it interesting and very frustrating, especially for somebody who was as ill-versed in comic history as I was, that I was, I'd go to a website, Albert Moy, whoever, at the time, there weren't as many as there are now. Yeah. And it's listed by artist. I'm like, I don't care about the artist. I want to find the book or, that I'm looking for at the time. And it's people always go artist first, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I understand it more now. But it does imply a value to the artist as opposed to the character or the title, and and I'm still thinking the whole thing in terms of long. I'm trying to get away from everybody equates quality to price, and I'm trying to get away from that. But in long term. The ability for an artist or a piece of art to have long-term just longevity, I guess, within the collecting community, and say, hey, this, I don't care, and I'm picking Rob Liefeld again, and I don't own anything by him. I have nothing against it. I know it's a zero for me, so I don't care talking about it. But sort of saying that because he created a new way of looking at art, even if Youngblood never shows up again and nobody gives a crap about Youngblood, They want to have a young blood page because it's Rob Liefeld, and he created a new style of art. 100 years down the road, is there any way for capturing that? Should we acknowledge that? I think we should, because
I think it exists though now. But you're right. Like a few years back, it wasn't organized like that, and people weren't really hip to keywords. So like no one was using SEO the way that now we understand to. But I think we understand to now more because of things like Twitter and Instagram and hashtags than necessarily categorization, right? And I think that's what you're getting at, is that as a categorization, certainly Teen Titans is as valid a search as George Perez. And now I think you can do that. The one of the things that would drive me crazy about the CAF site is that it's not mobile optimized. And so like you got to do that thing where you stretch it open to be able to type in, or else it automatically defaults and pops away. And I think it's because the site has grown to such a degree beyond what it was ever intended to, that now doing that is almost a redo, right? But most people who have sites are able to scale, and there's, if you're savvy enough with your web design, it should be something that you can scale fairly well. And, some people have been able to do that better than others, we'll say. But way back when I first set up the first Pop Sequentialism site, it was a Flash site, and you could search by comic, you could search by character, you could search by artist, you could search by writer. Like anybody, I was putting as much information into it as I was logging each piece so that it was easy for me to find later in case I ever wanted to find it that way. When I look on CAF, it sometimes drives me crazy that someone just pops a page up. Maybe the penciler's name is listed. Sometimes the inker isn't listed. If there's lettering on it, the letterer isn't listed. Like it tells you nothing. And then I'm probably guilty of posting too much, right? Like I post a little mini novel with every page that I pop up. But sometimes people don't even put the size of the artwork on the listing. I think everybody wants to know what the size of the artwork is.
I don't think people need to put the size of the artwork, except for when it's anything other than 11 by 17.
The one that surprised me, actually, that one
because
is
that's the standard.
When I saw a page from Stray Toasters by Sienkiewicz. I was just like, oh my God, that's tiny. I didn't realize that they were like, itty bitty pages, so I was just like, and if you're bidding on it, I think it is a little important. Again, I guess that's if it's different than the norm.
Yeah. And I wish, that, we talked about this too, that people weren't so afraid to post prices. Like, hey, I just picked this up for $500. And people are like, holy crap, that's amazing. And maybe that makes them go search the page of the person that you bought it from. Like, tell people where you got it. Like if you're thankful that you picked up a piece, from Splash Page, then be like, hey, Mark Hay, Mark Hay hooked this up for me. And
I can vouch for a lot of people. I see a lot of people do mention that. And I actually have to say, I don't have to say, but I'm gonna say, I actually, when I see people doing that, to be honest, I'm always kind of like, who cares? Like, who cares? I don't care where you got it. You don't have to mention where you got it. Just tell us what you're happy about. Like, why do you like the page? That's what I want to hear.
Sure.
I don't care where you got it. You know what I mean?
But if you found their page, if you found that this page on CAF, you probably like that character. You probably like that series. And so knowing where they got it is important to you because you may want that. You may want something like that.
Oh, from that point of view, you're right. But as you know, just as well as I do, a lot of people, the ones who, most people still, you're right. They don't put that information. I think that most of that is because this is a one-of-a-kind product. So it's all about me versus you versus him versus her.
Yeah.
It's right. Each man and woman for themselves. And I'm not giving you any advantage, right?
But it's not even necessarily advantage. But if you're looking, I always thought if you're looking for something, you don't let it know that much, because somebody who knows exactly what you're looking for, they're going to
charge you more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I like the idea of maybe posting prices, which I don't do either for my stuff that isn't for sale. And, but like usually when I unbox stuff, I'll be like, hey, I just picked this up for, whatever price. And I got it from so-and-so. And it's funny, that we've recently seen a bit of a controversy from a certain dealer who all their artists disappeared off their roster within 3 days. And now some of those people are selling direct, and some of those people have a new place at a new art rep that they're working with. So I mean, like, that would be especially interesting to know, because I don't even think the artists sometimes know how much their artwork was being sold for. And certainly if they weren't getting paid, they had no idea what was being charged for it. So it would be helpful even to them to know what their artwork was being sold for.
Speaking of that, I just read a follow-up article, because it seems to be only Bleeding Cool News that I see that keeps kind of following up on this. And they put up, I just saw yesterday another follow-up on it. Or was it? No, I'm sorry. Was it Bleeding Cool? I think I saw something on YouTube. Okay, maybe they referred to Bleeding Cool, but anyways, apparently it may even not be now about delayed or non-payment. Apparently, they made it sound like it was more about non-fulfillment of customer orders. But at this point,
I mean, they were notorious for shipping late. Like,
right.
I got super lucky. I bought stuff from them. I wouldn't say all. I could never say all the time, but I certainly picked up 7 or 8 pieces from them in the last year and a half, and I got my stuff really quick. But I would hear horror. I mean, Jeff Wedding, I don't think is in the chat right now, but he was waiting on stuff for like 6 months. And I'm wondering, were they getting the images from the artists and uploading that and selling it, and then waiting for the artist to ship to them? See, and the artists weren't shipping to them. I mean, that can totally happen.
Yeah, that I don't know either, because and I've talked about this when it comes to like representing art. A few people reached out to me after that news for Cadence came out. Marcus was the first guy to reach out to me, telling me, "Oh, you should try to get some of those artists or whatever." And while I appreciate that he thinks I'm worthy of that, I'm not like so into it anymore, because, well, for many, many reasons, right? Yeah. But one of those many reasons is like artists. So many artists, when I was still talking to artists about representation.
Here it comes.
So many artists are like, "Oh, okay, yeah, it all sounds good to me, but how about I hold the art? I'm going to hang on to the art, and when you make a sale, you let me know, and I'll ship." And it's like, no. I know a lot of people actually do that. Some reps, they're so desperate to have more artists on board, they'll do anything, right? And I'm like, are you serious? You're I'm not going to tell the artist that, but basically, we all know most of them are very flaky.
That requires a lot of trust. That definitely requires a lot of trust.
Yeah, like, I'm ever going to take money from somebody off my website and then email you to say, "Hey, I got an order. I need that page. I need those pages."
I can't find it.
I can't find it. Or it's, I'm really on a tight deadline. Give me a week. Like, what?
See, that's because I'll tell you. So as someone who ran gallery spaces for decades, when I transitioned into just having online shows, unless I have a physical location show, I don't make the artists mail me all the work. But I deal with one artist a month. That means I know them. This is more than just, a one-off show. This is going to be a long-term working relationship. I do more than just sell their work. Good night, Karen. And that's a lot easier to do than to juggle 50 artists who are producing work every month that's being published. That becomes impossible to track. That would require having physical possession of the work, because artists also in the comic art world, those artists are going to go to conventions. They're going to have that work at their table, and they're going to be selling it.
Right.
So what if you sell a piece that they just sold at their table? Now you got to kick a payment back. Who gets the bad feedback? So the person who wanted to buy it from you is going to assume, oh, they must have found somebody who's going to pay them more for it, you know, and now that's on you as the rep, not on the artist who sold it at their table. So like in this particular end of the art world, it's trickier to be able to do that. But I also understand a lot of artists who are like, they've heard horror stories, like not getting paid, right? Like a lot, and especially illustrators get ripped off a lot. So I understand them wanting to be a little bit more protective, but yeah, you got to be good at it. And, you know, a lot of artists, I think at this point are kind of like, I'd rather just sell the entire issue to somebody and make less money than I'm getting per page selling through this rep, just so I can be done with it and not have to worry about it. Or, you know what, I'm just done selling my artwork until I need money. And then it becomes their headache and their problem. And they're not going to understand how much work it is to actually log and maintain and keep track of that stuff. I saw one artist one of the first artists I saw who posted about the Cadence situation said, you know what, I really hate mailing stuff, so I'm not sure if this is the end of my selling artwork or not. You know, and maybe that's going to push a lot of those artists towards digital because it's one less thing for them to worry about.
Yeah, yeah. Who knows? Probably not though, because if you're an artist who has never even looked at the digital thing, you're probably thinking, yeah, I'm not. That's a whole new. Like I got my deadlines as it is. I don't have the free time to spend learning how to draw digitally with this tool and then go out and buy this expensive tool. You know. So yeah. I don't think so. I mean, maybe on a small scale, I agree, but for the most part, I don't think so. You know.
I mean, you've seen the videos that some of these artists post their digital work. They're working on like an iPad. You know, like you can get sophisticated. I mean, I have a really expensive Wacom. I don't think I've ever plugged it in. You know, so it's not the hardest thing to do. Artists of a certain age are probably going to be less likely to adapt. But, you know, I think that it's, you know, two sides of things. I think that a lot of times artists don't understand how much work goes into being a curator or into being a rep, like that. While
business person, I mean, that's
why they all jump around every time some fanboy says at a con, you know, hey, yeah, you know, I know you're with that person, but like, you know, I'd be willing to help you and sell your art I'll only take this much.
Yeah.
You know, and then, oh, really? Okay, I'll go with you. And they jump around, right? Because all they think about is, oh, it's cheaper for me. That's all it is. There's no value in who is this person? What do they know? How well do they work? You know what I mean?
And then there's people that just straight up lie to them. You know, like that someone's like, oh, I wanted to buy that piece, but I couldn't work with your dealer or something. It's like they've never sent an email. They had no intention of buying anything. They just like talking to artists, you know, and so like they feel like they'll get more attention if they sound like someone interested in buying because they see them doing business and they're just wasting time. Like so much. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard from somebody, you know, an artist in a show is like, oh, someone told me that they were trying to get a hold of you. I'm like, dude, have you ever had trouble getting hold of me? Like, have I always answered every single phone call every time you've called me? You know, like, and it's people like to blow wind, you know, it's like they just want to feel like they don't have the money to buy stuff, but they want to get the person's time. And it's such a,
well, let me ask you that, and we're going off on tangents again, but out of curiosity, you know, Cadence had a really substantial roster of talent there. That's a lot of people to keep track of.
Yeah.
And do so. How many people, I think, is it reasonable for one rep to really manage?
Well, I think that this is another thing too. So in the fine art world, you can expect a gallery to take 50% because ostensibly there's exhibitions, work goes into that. There's promotion, work goes into that. Selling comic art is really different. Selling comic art to a degree sells itself, right? Like that really what you're paying them for is to hold your artwork and ship it. And that's really, and then pay you. Like that's really all they're expecting. So I think the usual take is 25% or 20% is what most art reps are taking for comic art, right?
It used to be 20, like 20 years ago, it used to be 20 was like the you know, standard.
Yeah.
But because all these fanboys came in, oh, come with me and I'll do it for 15. And then these guys would jump over to that person, right? And then other fanboys would come in. Oh, I'll do it for 10 if you want. I'll do it for, and then they jump again, and suddenly, and then you have what's his face on Comic Art Live, Dueling Dealers. Oh, I'll do it for
5%.
Yeah, worked out a shit fucking 5%, and he admitted that he did a shit deal. But again, because he did it for 5%, there's people now going out around offering artists, I'll do it for 5%.
Not worth it. It's not worth it. I mean, that's
doing.
I mean, that's
why
everybody
charges for free. You're working for free at that point.
Yeah, but that's why they're charging $30 to send a piece of artwork, instead of $12.75. But that's not going to pay the bills either. I think but the bigger problem as it approaches, and I think this speaks to the conversation. It sounds a little bit more tangential, but I'm going to narrow here, is that the going rate on artwork is directly connected to how many pages you actually sell. So if you're producing 22 pages of artwork and you've got one splash page, one title page, one end page, and you probably don't get the cover, right? Because the covers are going to a different person who's got nothing to do with the book. What good is it if you sell a splash page? If your regular rate is $200 a page, say $220, seems to be pretty common, somewhere between $150 and $225 for panel pages, unless you're a big name. And then your splash page is like $600, and a double page splash is $1,500. If you're not calculating that in like the guys at Image used to do every single month, then you've got 16, 17 pages sitting there month after month after month. And if you're working on an indie book, so maybe the pages in the first issue sell because of the first appearance of a character, or it's a birth page where it just happens to be in the same book, which drives me nuts. And that's probably a whole other conversation. But you're going to have like a lot of work that's just sitting. It isn't selling.
Yeah. And I mean, if I may interject, Matt, and this kind of goes to what Heidjer was asking. Yes, to have like 100 artists, like you better be with your spreadsheets, and you better be organized, and you better be a naturally organized type person. Okay, obviously. However, like you just said, Matt, and this goes to you, Heidjer, the reality is the reason some reps can get up to like 75, 100 artists or whatever, it's because they will take everybody and anybody. In other words, this guy here that I've been repping for a while, he has a friend and he's telling me that, he's got a friend that he needs a rep. Sure, I'll take him. So what happens is you may get up to 100, but like the vast majority of them, like a good percentage, work on books whose art doesn't really sell.
Not how many you can get, but how many as a rep. If you're managing. And this is a gallery owner, I guess, and this goes again to the bigger picture of fitting into the fine art box, if you will. And can you do a good job for
12 a year?
Well, like I said, if most of the artist's work doesn't really sell, other than a page here and a page there, right? You're even with 100 artists, you probably have 15 to 20 whose monthly book has characters that are popular enough, or a story that's popular enough that you sell a fair bit amount of from each issue. So so even though you may have 100 right on your under your umbrella, you're not really having to like deal with sales from 100 different artists every single month. Most, like
even a great artist, even a popular artist, Raphael Albuquerque. Right now, you can go to a splash page and pull up Raphael Albuquerque's name and probably find 80 pages available. I mean, probably, right?
Yeah.
Fairly affordable even.
Yeah.
I mean, he's an in-demand artist, and Mark's prices are fantastic. Like, as far as like who I like to buy from, I love to buy from Mark Hay, but like not every page is a banger. And when you get an artist who's now like 20 different series deep in their career, and the splash pages go like that, they go super quick. And then I get all these panel pages, and you're getting further and further away from the first appearance of a character. You're getting, sometimes the writer changes, and so that guy's contracted for, 5 more issues than the writer is, maybe sometimes, or usually it's the opposite, but could be the case. It just becomes less popular for whatever reason. Or that the artist announced they're going to go back on a title that was more popular. Then no one cares about the stuff, because There's no reason to buy it right now. Like, what do you hear in Hollywood? Why do we need to make this movie now? So if I know there's 80 pages of Raphael Albuquerque out there, why do I need to buy a Raphael Albuquerque page now if it's not a super important page? So that stuff is going to sit even with the best artists out there. Now, again, I know Mark's markup is lean. So it's not like he can all of a sudden just have a 20% off sale and blow out those pages, because if he does, he's making no money, like literally no money.
But that's the thing, Matt. Is there even a markup? People keep talking about this rep markup thing. And I keep saying, I never marked up a thing in my life. I try to price it. You try to find that sweet spot of the fair where you think the fair market value is. Mm-hmm. That's what I price it at. And my artist pays me out of his pocket. Like, out of the whole total, he gives me a percentage of the total price we priced it at. I'm not putting an extra certain amount of money on top of what I think the market value is. Are people actually doing that?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's your contract with your artist, is how much you get paid for each page. It's usually a percentage, type of percentage.
Right. It's usually a percentage. What I'm saying is people keep talking like as if, oh, the reps make the art more expensive. And my argument is, I certainly don't. I do my job to find, right now, Mike Perkins, right? I do my job and try to find the fair market value for whatever the current title he's working on, you know?
It kills me that I didn't get that Swamp Thing splash.
Oh.
And you know the one I'm talking about. It's like everything on one page. I was like, God, that is a beautiful page.
Of course. Somebody in the chat has it.
So let me ask, because Matt's had a gallery or has a gallery. What, taking this with it doesn't matter if it's vintage or current. Is there a future for showing comic art in a gallery then? I mean,
of course there is.
First up, I mean, I buy stuff that I haven't read the book. It's kind of gone the other way. I see art now and I go buy the book because it grabs me. And
right.
There's one a dark star. I just bought one page from it called The Ice Cream Man.
Yep.
And loved the art. And I said, this is really twisted.
Yeah.
And I like it. And even without word balloons, the art spoke to me. But I mean,
have a good one, Carl.
But that's what I figure a gallery would do, is you show something that will grab you. So, I mean, it's got to be more than just showing. I mean, for a rep, and I'm not putting anybody on the spot here, but I mean, maybe it's the next step up. Because I mean, if you're repping Brancusi, if you're repping one of the fine artists, you're doing more than just throwing it up there. Say, hey, there's the art.
Well, look at Batman Black and White, right? So Sean Murphy. His every time there's an art drop, there's an art exhibition. That stuff is framed and on the walls at Metropolis Comics. And that helped. I mean, and he's been doing that for a long, ever since that first sale of pages from Batman Black and White. I mean, when one issue was on the newsstands, they were like, don't sell anything. Let's wait. And then we'll do a sale. When the next series came out, I think it might have been a Harley series. I can't remember the title was, but it was the second Batman Black and White alternate universe series that he did. Metropolis again did a drop, and they had he hangs on to the super important pages. He keeps them because he knows they're going to be worth a fortune. But he did sell he untethered some of the prelims. Now his prelims are beautiful. They're really, I like some of the prelims better than the finished pages because I like his process. So I bought a bunch of them, and I've since sold some of them, and I've held on to a couple. And they're a lot cheaper than the published page, but they're starting to get close. His prelims are now worth about a third of the price of the finished pages. Not every artist can get that much for a prelim. I mean, Jock can probably get that much for a prelim. There's a small handful of people, but
I saw a video here on YouTube just yesterday. A guy who had gone to OAX.
Yep.
He seems just by how excited he gets every time he sees a page of art on a table. I think he's pretty new to it all.
Yeah.
But he went and he bought yeah, from the White Knight, one of the either White Knight or the sequel, whatever, one of those Batman things. He bought a fairly rough prelim. It was like $300. I was like, Jesus,
that's super cheap.
That's cheap.
That's super cheap.
Who pays $300 for a panel page prelim? Like, wow, that's pretty good money to me, man. Holy crap!
I mean, I've sold panel page prelims for $1,500 from the first book from Sean Murphy.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
What?
But I mean, it's all. But again, it's what's a page? It's like the page I had is the I Do page where Harley and the Joker get are getting married. So I mean, that's an important panel page in the history of these characters. But I mean,
that's right, Marcus. That's the guy. That's the guy. He always says, "Wow, that's sick." Literally,
but yeah. I mean,
brand new newbie,
But only in this hobby are those nuances important. I should say that in an animation, but it's only in sequential art forms where that matters, because each page and each art is unique. But what makes page 1 and page 2 very different in price is the narrative, like to Heidjer's point. And it's like, so all these things irrespective, is there a metric to use? And it's really difficult to untether those things. You can't really say that, well, this is objectively a better drawing than this. This could be the first drawing of a very important character by one of the co-formers of the character, and then somebody else takes the character and it becomes popular, like Deadpool. Like, I mean, if you want Deadpool art, you don't really want Liefeld Deadpool art, but he created the character. You want the funny, self-referential, mimetic version of the character that Joe Kelly was writing, I think, a few years later, and you want from that run. And now there's Scotty Young was doing all those, kind of crazy cartoony, covers and stuff. And again, like Scotty Young, I begrudge him nothing for the fact that he makes a fortune making his covers. I'm really surprised that he gets as much money as he gets for those covers, and people love his work. It doesn't seem to me to be supremely difficult to do, but he's established himself as a fan favorite, and people love his stuff. And every once in a while I see a cover and it's not a character he usually does, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, you kind of just have to give it up. But I mean, someone was talking about Fred Hembeck earlier. Fred Hembeck isn't a phenomenal illustrator, and he's certainly not as phenomenal an illustrator, I think, as Scotty Young is, who is also very stylized. But because he's stylized, a Fred Hembeck drawing immediately. And that's going to benefit him in the long run. That when, God forbid, the guy passes away, and there's a certain amount of work out there, and he does those great little trading cards that he used to do for like $10 or $15, and now they're getting more expensive because of Jeff Wedding giving them away. But but that the published Hembeck stuff is going to be worth a fortune, because there's not a lot of published.
There's
Hembeck
so
stuff.
little of that stuff, though.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm going. My mind's going off on a tangent here, because we're still talking just about American comics.
Well, most manga is hard to get.
Most of us only collect that, so that's why.
I collect a lot of Fumetti. I collect Fumetti heavily
for U.S. stuff abroad, and I mean, Persepolis went for $40,000 a page when it went under the hammer. I forget it was Sotheby's or in London. I mean. So why does that? I mean, I think Persepolis is a great book. Don't get me wrong, but why does that get something? What about it is iconic versus maybe not Fred Hembeck, but a Sandman?
Sure. They're similar, though. I mean, they're similar.
By the way, I just want to ask these guys in the live chat. Can you guys tell me who are you? Who are you saying that Hembeck is better than?
He's saying Scotty Young. He's saying Scotty Young.
Oh, okay.
But I think that Persepolis is a really good example. You could also say Pride of Baghdad. You could say any book that transcended, anything that transcends comics and becomes important to people that don't read comics. Persepolis is one of those 10 graphic novels that you recommend to people that don't read comics.
Interrupt for a second. But that's, I think, what we're getting at. Does it transcend the character?
Yeah, but yeah.
character,
because the narrative's important.
Yeah, I mean, even if you don't read comics and you're looking at a page of Byrne art, Cockrum art from X, does it transcend the characters?
Yeah, I think sometimes. I think in superhero comics, it's maybe harder, right?
Does what transcend the characters?
Like, how many superhero comics do you recommend to people that don't like comics? Like, there's a finite amount. Like, usually when something like Scott Pilgrim pops up and you're like, oh, you don't like comics? Well, maybe you like this because this is kind of a different thing. And honestly, O'Malley's pages from the first Scott Pilgrim graphic novel, kind of cheap for the impact that book has had, honestly.
And this is why when I got back into it, if you will back, I went, this is more information than necessary, but I bought a lot of stuff at the spinner rack. I didn't get into X-Men and crap like that because I can never get any sequential issues. So you have like all this, I need self-contained stories. Yeah. So when I was back in college, the first thing I pressed in somebody's head, like, oh, you don't remember 1990, comics have changed. Here, read the Sandman book.
Yeah.
Oh, this is not what I remember reading.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you just said, and it goes to the story. So I mean, when you're looking at, again, longevity of the art, of what's going, Persepolis, Mouse, these ones that transcend, the story transcends. Sandman will as well, regardless of the artist. Yeah. And I'm a big story fan on this, but how do you convey? I mean, somebody coming into this, again, you love what you collect. Doesn't matter if you're happy with it, so forth. Long term, what makes something art?
Well, I mean, it's inherently art. It's what makes it fine art, or what makes it important. And I think that's the question you're asking, right?
I mean, for lack of going down, what makes it something that will, in 100 years from now, someone who's never was not subjected to any of the pop culture of the day, who never read it, or maybe they did read it and kind of go, that's still cool. That means something.
I mean, that's an important thing. Will these be important? Will Persepolis be important in 100 years? Yeah. Will Pride of Baghdad be important in 100 years? Will Sandman be important in 100 years?
Hold on.
That's a long time.
Here's another question, guys. Is it even important, or is it just good?
Well, I mean,
good, but are they important? Important to who?
Sandman won a World Fantasy Award. It's the first comic to ever win a World Fantasy Award, and that makes that an important comic because it was the same writer through the entire series. While the creative teams get different, I mean, you can absolutely say, and this is true, that was it who illustrated the Midsummer Night's Dream issue?
Charles Vess.
Yeah. That also is what helped launch Charles Vess's price point. So you could get Charles Vess art fairly affordably in that time frame until Sandman won a World Fantasy Award. Then all of a sudden, all his artwork sold overnight. A couple of people bought most of it. The same art rep was repping John J. Muth. Try and find a Moonshadow page. Like Kent Williams, those guys. So like all those guys, George Pratt, were all represented by the same rep for a time, and a lot of that stuff went quick. And then after that happened, people were like, well, wait a minute, this isn't the first painted comic. Sienkiewicz had done Electra Assassin. How come that's not? Whoops, that's gone. Oh, wait a minute, Kent Williams had done Blood, a Tale. Oh, that's gone. So all the painted comic book pages started disappearing overnight. Then you had, like, obviously with at the same time Sandman is getting big, you had the Batman movie comes out, and then the first new Batman product that hits is Arkham Asylum. And so you've got the cover artist for Sandman did all the interiors, for Arkham Asylum. It becomes the biggest selling graphic novel of all time because it's the only new Batman thing out when the Batman movie comes out. And how befuddling was that for people? Can you imagine? You see Tim Burton's Batman movie is the first thing that you're aware of Batman, and you buy Arkham Asylum?
Yeah.
I mean, your head explodes. I mean, can you even make sense of it? And I mean, that helps establish Grant Morrison as like a best-selling author and kind of like puts him in that echelon with Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman, but really put him ahead of Gaiman, in terms of his publishability. And he started taking on a lot of jobs. Gaiman stayed special because he was a great marketer of his own ability. He would call up publications or have his girlfriend at the time call up publications and say, yeah, we're sorry, we have to turn you down for that request that we got for the Neil Gaiman interview. And they'd be like, did someone call who called looking for a game? And then how come we can't interview him? And then they'd have this thing ready to go. He was really smart about that stuff. He was also kind of handpicked by Alan Moore to be his replacement on Miracle Man. And if you remember, the publishing history of Miracle Man was so tough. It's hard for them to get an issue out. It never ended officially. But honestly, the attention span when Alan Moore stopped writing it, no one cared about it until Sandman became a hit. And then people went back and started looking for those Miracle Man issues, which were extremely rare. They're the most valuable part of that run of the Gaiman comics, and not because there's nostalgia for it, because people who were Gaiman fanatics couldn't get their hands on it. Say that those Hellblazer issues, the two Hellblazer issues, I think it's 18 and 19 or something that I think David Lloyd might have illustrated, that are phenomenal. And there's also the Hellraiser issue that Gaiman wrote that, oh my God, I can't think of his name. I did an art show with him, did the covers to all the Sandman stuff. McKean. So they did that one issue within Hellraiser comic, Marvel's epic title, that super hard to find that comic. It's certainly almost impossible to find it in 9.8, those square bound black, horror comics got read and ruined, so this all leads into it. I think certain people become superstars and then everything that they touch turns to gold. That has certainly been true for Alan Moore, even though nothing he's written in comics for the past 25 years has been that noteworthy. I'd say Providence is a massive exception, and certainly Promethea. But how long has it been since Promethea got published? It's been a long ass time. The other stuff it's been
This is kind of what I was getting at when I brought up. And I wasn't giving my own opinion, by the way. I just wanted to put it out there as a question, right? That word, importance. Is any of this stuff important? And if so, to whom really? Because this stuff is so good and so apparently important. But like you say, Matt, it's so important, but there's not enough demand out there to keep some of this really great important stuff in print even. Well,
that's rights issues. I mean, that's a very different thing. And I mean,
but not always.
So the movie Looking for Mr. Goodbar?
I never saw it.
Late 70s film, Diane Keaton, a woman in the single scene, disco scene, the late 70s, a serial killer, early Richard Gere role, beloved film by a lot of people. Try and find a copy of it. Can't.
Never
been off the market since VHS days because there were disco songs in the soundtrack.
And heavy metal was the same way for a long time because you couldn't get all the rights lined up.
Yep, this is very common in the United States. A lot of this stuff ends up coming out in England, where they have a much more unified code about how to pay off music rights. So ASCAP in the United States allows the publisher to set a price. So in the UK, you can use the Mission Impossible theme for UK only for the same rate that you'll pay for a Beatles song, for the same rate you'll pay for Kylie Minogue, for the same rate you pay for the Bay City Rollers. It's all the same price. But it can only be released in the UK.
It makes you number one in my book right now.
What is it?
I said the fact that you just referenced the Bay City Rollers. Probably. Never mind.
I'll write a rock and roll love letter to you. But
you might have to track down. You might have to go on eBay and track down a $2,000 copy of the VHS cassette there, Heidjer.
Or just buy the UK import. But so this happens a lot. So rights issues are irrespective. Like all the America's Best Comics stuff, the 1963 or 62 line that Alan Moore and Steve Bissett and John Totleben and Rick Veitch all worked on, that was kind of like their version of the first Marvel comics, but done in a very postmodernist way. Great stuff. It was published by Image. It will never come out again because they each had the right to veto, and Alan Moore has said no to everything. So the only comics that got to come out again are the Rick Veitch comics. And so, but they're very dependent upon these other comics that you would have to go back to the news, to the back issue bins to pick up. And what's funny is that they're not valuable, but if they went into an omnibus, they would be valuable and therefore less collectible to the people that want them right now. So, these things are important side factors. Now, when we say something is important, I think what we generally mean is that they've had a significant cultural impact, right? Like we're talking about things that have entered the zeitgeist, that they're viewed as important, not just by nerds like us, but by people whose opinion matters to a larger group of people. These days we call them influencers. Before we'd call them, celebrities. And I think what's interesting is that influencers today don't have a barrier of intelligence to have. Like they're popular because they were willing to put a lot of effort into becoming whatever it is that they are, and now people pay attention. But tracking their influences is interesting. How many people actually have influence? Well, Taylor Swift has influence. If Taylor Swift starts telling people how she loves Love and Rockets comics, whoo boy, like
those graphic novel sales are gonna skyrocket.
but Selena Gomez. If Selena Gomez gets it in her head that she wants to make a live action TV series about Love and Rockets that is half an hour dedicated to Heartbreak Soup and half an hour dedicated to Las Locas, that will be huge. The cultural significance of Love and Rockets will now be bigger than it ever was within comics, which is pretty big in comics. I mean, few things are actually as respected as Love and Rockets is within comicdom. And it had the most erratic publishing schedule. A lot of people fell in and off because it was taking like 7 months to get an issue out sometimes. But when you go back, those first 2-3 collections are amazing. They still hold up. There's never been anything else like them. And if that were to translate into another pop culture medium, it would drive the price of all that early artwork even further up than it is now. And that stuff ain't cheap, but it's not anywhere near where it should be, considering its cultural impact beyond comics. The fact that it's routinely listed as among the best works ever done in sequential art. I mean, Maus is clearly there. I remember when I first read Maus, I was like, this seems really heavy-handed. It really did. But it was also, it connected in a way by being an underground comic, by tackling really, important, weighty stuff. There's nothing else like it. There's, there have been few things that have even attempted to be that since. So I think Maus is timeless. I think it's something that will always be important. Persepolis, I don't know. Like, if the plight of women changes globally, and especially in the Arab world, which is what that, well, sorry, not the Arab world, in the Muslim world, if the
and Iran specifically,
yeah, and Iran specifically, if that changed drastically, that will you could either point a line back and say this is a direct result of this graphic novel, or it gets completely forgotten. But either of those things could be true independently of the other. Pride of Baghdad is a very important graphic novel in the lifetimes of people who understand what it's actually about, because it is very connected to the Afghan war. It's less timeless, but was very lauded. Will that amount of respect maintain over time? I think I'd still recommend people read it because it's a very well written comic book. But as far as like the tremendous amount of praise that was heaped upon it, I would say, well, I prefer We 3, which is a science fiction tale that's anti-vivisection. And in a way, you agree with that?
I just gotta say, and this probably goes to what you just said about like, wow, the amount of attention heaped upon it, right? And the praise heaped upon it.
Yeah.
Because of that, I'm assuming it's because of that. My memory of that book when I bought it was, even to this day, it's like I don't remember much about the story. I just remember, it was really nice artwork. But I remember kind of being bored by the story, and I was just like, I just wanted to get through it, and just And it probably had a lot to do with the fact that it wasn't living up to all that hype. Right? And when it doesn't live up to the hype, it makes it feel like it's really not very good, even if it is good,
And that's that hype fast. Hype versus something that organically, I mean, a lot of households and Santa's post offices came organically.
Yeah.
You know, and
almost out of nowhere, to be honest. Like, it was
Yeah.
kind of like try and find a first printing of that. You know, like, that is a hard book to find a first print of.
Of what?
Persepolis.
Oh.
So there's also, but, you know, one of the reasons why I mentioned We 3, that was a dream project for James Gunn for years. He wanted to do We 3. He kind of did it in the third Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you make We 3 now, is it too much like a subplot of Guardians of the Galaxy 3? Because it's so similar. It's clearly an anti-vivisection film. And I mean, and Gunn was the right guy. If you were going to pick somebody to make We 3, it's either going to be Gunn or it's going to be, you know, George Miller. You know, it's either going to be the guy that made Babe, and really the guy that made Babe 2, Pig in the City, or it was going to be James Gunn. And now it's kind of like, how can you do that? You know, I saw somebody put in, you know, Transmet. I'm like, Transmetropolitan is a complete ripoff of Hunter S. Thompson. Like, I never got why that was so big. It is a total lift.
If somebody's never read Hunter S. Thompson,
you're getting, those are fighting words for JC, because he's loving that Transmet stuff.
Read Hunter S. Thompson. You know, go back to the root. You know, it's like, I love the movie Fatal Attraction, but it's clearly a ripoff of Diabolique.
Well,
you know, so it's like,
let's take that back a second, because I mean, I think that is somebody saw the value of Hunter S. Thompson. Not that anybody didn't, but put it into a comic book. By the same token, going back to another discussion, if you look at the Flash Gordon page, where you had the Leia prototype with the ones that sold for $70,000, I mean, from the 20s, there's always a predecessor as well. So I mean,
that's the thing. That's the thing, is that, like, in our hobby, right, the comic book industry, oftentimes, I would say the majority of the time, you know, books that, like what you're saying, Matt, that kind of like are rip-offs of this other story, whether it was a film or a novel, most of the time, the comic book reader isn't aware of that, you see? So the comic book that they're taught, that they love, it's amazing, but they don't even know that, oh shit, it's basically a rip-off of this other thing. And man, if they only had a chance to, hey, Emil,
you
mentioned Bradbury, right? You mentioned
homage. A rip-off homage.
Well, homage is French for rip-off. But you know, you mentioned Bradbury and the fact that he wrote, you know, that books were replaced by comics. You know why he wrote that into Fahrenheit 451? Because EC were ripping off his short stories and not paying him for it. And so he took a pot shot at the comics industry. But to a great degree, isn't that the whole thing? Is like, the comics industry counts on the ignorance of its readers to not be smarter. And so, like, what I love is when we prove them wrong, and I hate when we prove them right.
Can I let me just quickly put up a comment from Hoarder's Hide. I think it's interesting. I want to see what you guys think. So in 100 years, 90% of the people will still be talking about the DC Big Three. I guess he means the Trinity: Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and everything Marvel. The other 10% will be talking about how barbaric 90% are.
It's Superman, Batman, Spectre. Just it's Hoarder's Hide.
So now I'll pause at this. If you were reading comics in the 1940s, you would think that everybody would be talking about Funny Animals comics in 100 years. If you were reading comics in the 1950s, you would think that we'd still all be reading true crime comics and horror comics. You know, if you were reading Mad Magazine in the 1960s and 70s, you would think Mad Magazine would be around forever. I mean, we have a really, really short attention span for history, don't we? And I think that, you know, when we make these kind of like bold statements, well, we know it's going to be this. We don't know this. We don't know what it's going to be like in 10 years. I mean, superheroes have been around for a tremendous amount of time in the history of, and been at number one for a really, really long time. And I'd say that maybe it's outlived its welcome. You know, that maybe we're going to see another shift. Maybe we'll be back to Westerns. I think it's going to be sci-fi. I think sci-fi is going to be the next really big growth industry for comic books. I think that those IPs are going to prove to be very valuable for TV series, which is what I think gets us the wider demographic. Now, will that make those comics valuable? That's a whole different conversation. We've seen a lot of TV shows adapt comics, and especially independent comics, get canceled after 1 or 2 seasons, have very little impact on whether those comics become valuable. But then we've seen 1 season of Sandman. And like, they can do this right. And like, You can watch Sandman and not read the comics and love it, but if you love the comics, you like that show and you love the comics even more. And so, like, if Saga gets adapted in any kind of quality way, Saga will open up the doors for a massive influx of really good adaptations of science fiction comics. But you need a writer that's going to be dedicated to writing 10 years of a comic book. And not a single writer in the last 10 years who's been able to maintain any kind of long distance, high quality run on a comic book. In the last 10 years, it's tough. 20 years ago, you could say, sure, Bunker's run on, Brute Baker's run on Daredevil, the Bendis run on Daredevil before it.
Roy Thomas Conan.
Sure, that's 45 years ago.
Yeah. Well,
so, I mean, like,
let's. I mean, in all fairness to the writers, you know, because I'm very much story driven, and I've always loved the stories.
I'm with you.
And a corollary in terms of music. How many one-hit wonders out there, as opposed to people that write great song after great song after great song? There's only so many stories you can tell. 10 years is a long time to tell a lot of stories. I mean, that's the tough part. You know, most folks have. I don't know how many good stories do you have in you. You know, and that's why I think that's kind of tough.
Sure. Yeah, it is tough. I think it's also very low reward. And I think that why you're going to see a shift away from DC and Marvel is that the creators aren't invested in that. Why would I hang in there and make DC a ton of money writing Batman when I can write my own character where I'm getting paid 100% of the money minus what it costs to publish it and make more selling 6,000 copies of my own comic than if I sell 120,000 copies to Marvel? That there's no incentive for anybody to hang in there and do that for a DC or a Marvel, but there's a lot of incentive to do it at Image. The thing is, what will save comic book shops is that you have to have your Scott Snyders, your Jason Aarons, you know, all the, you know, your the Hickok, what's his Hickox? Who's the guy that did Manhattan Projects?
Oh.
Who also did a great run on X-Men. But the point is, they have to keep a toe in the water at DC or Marvel to get people into the shops to buy those comics and then publish their own titles on the same schedule with those comics they're doing at DC and Marvel so that the fans buy their Batmans, their Supermans, their Spider-Mans, their X-Men, and that creator-owned product. Yes, Hickman. Hickman's a great writer. Probably the most complex writer in comics. I love Brian K. Vaughan as well. Vaughan will probably never go back and write for the big two. He just makes way too much money not writing for them. And, you know, I think that because of a lack of respect for the source material, and then the fact that the HR departments are making all the decisions about who gets hired as a writer rather than the stories, it's causing a massive problem in having any kind of quality product put out, and certainly in any kind of consistency. Because if you go by what's okay to say this week versus next week, there's no consistency in the storytelling.
Well, I mean, you know, the thing is that you see a lot of also people going, "Oh, the Superman, this is not Superman, the superhero time has passed. People are tired of superheroes." I don't think so. They're tired of crappy stories.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the superheroes are just a vehicle to tell a story. And I always think the comic books have a lot of really great creative stories. It's just a question of how do you get it to that next medium that people will accept it and imbibe, shall we say?
And that's the irony with the films, right? Because the films are mostly adapted of bad stories in the comics.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Infinity Gauntlet was kind of dopey. Like, it was kind of a dopey comic. It had a lot of bang for its buck because there was a lot of stuff going on. I mean, when they said they were going to be adapting, you know, Infinity Gauntlet early in, I mean, even before I think Age of Ultron came out. Again, Age of Ultron, not a particularly great run in the Avengers comics, but they got the right writers in to write some pretty amazing stuff based on this kind of junky stuff, you know, and so it hasn't always been, and usually like good stories get adapted poorly, right? Because we love them too much. So like our love for it makes it adapted bad.
Details, you know, same reason.
Yeah. So we have obviously a very rich history of comics. We have a very long life of these great stories, and an inability, but really I think more a lack of will to necessarily make them right. Like, I mean, Madam Web shows that, right? Like that Sony has absolutely no idea what makes a good movie and makes a bad movie. They just do not know. And I mean, when you saw X-Men First Class, so they're like, okay, we're going to redo the X-Men. Here's a bunch of people that were never X-Men in the X-Men. You know, we're going to make up a character here that shape changes because we need someone that crosses this box and this box for what we think the audience is for this, as opposed to who the actual audience is. And, you know, I see this has been a thing that's been troping online a lot, where like there's someone isolated a bunch of people who have done Marvel and DC movies that have never read comics. And it's like, oh yeah, I never read the comics. I never read the comics. Like, oh, no wonder why they suck. Well, guess what? The guys who did Avengers, what was their big claim to fame? A TV sitcom about a dysfunctional family. You know, like not the hugest Captain America fans on the planet. Good writers.
Yeah.
Good writers who, when they were given a tremendous budget and enough oversight from a CEO who had a great idea about continuity, produced an amazing couple of films. And, you know, we forget that the success and failure rely on a lot of different moving parts. Comic book is a writer and an artist and a publisher that will let them do it. And if that publisher won't let them do it, somebody else might, if it's their characters. But if you're working in a known IP, you've got all these rules on top of you of what you can and can't do. You've got editors that maybe are kind of writers themselves that want to do their own take on a character and aren't going to let somebody else do it because they want to use it at some point. You've got whether or not an artist is making more money from another publisher is going to stay on the title. These consistency problems, I think, are deeper and richer and cause much more reasons for people to go away. Is continuity of creativity, not continuity of characters and story and relation. Like, I could care less if every month of Batman comics has nothing to do with the previous year of Batman comics. I don't care about that continuity. I care about a good Batman comic. And I certainly don't care if what happened in a Green Lantern comic that Batman walked into affects the Batman story. But the publishers have decided long ago that they think making everybody buy other titles that they don't want to buy sells more comics. That hasn't been proving true. So it's like, but what if we have 20 different covers, you know, and that way we can have 20 different covers and someone who likes that artist will buy this cover and that artist will buy that cover. And we're going to make the stores buy all of them. Well, great. Now those comics are worthless, but they don't care because they got what they got on their wholesale cost of them. And it's a really short-sighted plan. You know, what you were saying, Heidjer, you know, you respect the story, you respect what's going on. That's where I come at comics. I will tolerate poor art if the story is great. But great art with no story, I'll look at it in the newsstand and I'll put it back. I'm not going to follow that every month. I didn't buy any of that Image stuff. And when they called in people like Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman and Dave Sim to write one issue here or there, it was the worst work they'd ever done. It was like the most phoned in job that any of these guys had ever done. I mean, and even like when they brought Moore back in for, was it Supreme or Top 10 or something? I mean, it was still like really low caliber Alan Moore. You know, it was better than what was happening on those titles previously because, I mean, quite frankly, nobody was writing it before. But, you know, it's still not good stuff. And let me need to get back to that.
Thank you, Matt. Well, very well said, by the way. I just wanted to quickly interject only to say, to bring it to yours and Heidjer's and everybody else watching your attention that we've hit the 3-hour mark.
Oh, wow.
There's still 40 people there was a total, like at the peak, there was 57, but there's still 40 people watching, which usually on my episodes at the 3-hour mark, it's like 20, whatever. So I just want to tell you guys, because clearly you guys at some point want to go. And apparently the people watching and listening don't want to leave yet, which is pretty awesome.
Apparently our crossover works just as well as Civil War. So, oh my God, I proved my point wrong.
But anyways, I just want you guys to be aware of that, because if you got to go, you got to go. You let us know, you know. Like,
I'd like to get to the third part of what Heidjer's pitch was.
What was the third part? Nostalgia, right? Was the third part nostalgia? Was that the part?
Yeah. I think that was it. Yeah.
I think we've been all over, but I'm game. You know, because I like this because it's not just talking about the price. You know,
Right.
like this sold for this, this sold for this. You know,
Dan's
and,
giving us props.
you
Dan's giving
Thanks,
us
Daniel.
props. Thank you, Dan.
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, that's really what comes down to. It's you know, it's so much. I mean, there's a love for the medium, and
Very
and,
true, Marcus. They don't let me get a word in.
and
Sorry,
that's
Heidjer.
right, Ruben.
What?
No, it's a love for the medium, and it's just I'm you know, we all seem to focus so much, and I guess bring it full circle, talk about the nostalgia. Oh, this sold for this much. Oh, this sold for this much. But there's not a lot of discussion. You know, you do hear it. People are aware of it. But coming back to the beyond the just the characters, just beyond the price, the art itself, you know, and the story as part of it. And you know, it's the fun. The fun part is Matt. You just mentioned it's the artist and the writer. No, it's the artists usually and the writer.
Yeah.
You know, and it's such a. It's almost like if you look at a band. In my mind, you know, you sometimes have a little bit of conflict coming out of it, but that produces the best result. You know, so yeah, I don't know.
Now that's getting less common too, right? Because since a lot of pencilers are just contrasting their pencils, they're not hiring inkers, you know, and it kind of brings us back to the beginning a little bit of, you know, the really good inkers are rare, and really good inkers that are willing to stay inkers, you know, that don't want to elevate to penciler. And I'm sure that has to do with how much they get paid, you know, and I'm not sure what the split is anymore. Like I remember once upon a time, you know, that the artwork wasn't just split. The pages weren't just split between the penciler and the inker. The writer got to select pages too to keep because it was their text, which is a really interesting dynamic. I'm sure it changes these days. I mean, I'm sure that it's the writer is hiring the creative team on behalf, you know, on behalf of the publisher. Like Image isn't going to say, "Oh, we love your script. Let's go hire so and so to do it." They're like, "Yeah, your script is good. Go get that comic done. When you've got 6 issues, let us know, and then we'll publish it for you." You know, so like it's really on the onus of that. Nick would be so valuable to get some feedback here.
He came back a few minutes ago and wants to agree to disagree on some of your points. Respectfully, of course.
Variant covers. But you know, but I think Nick is not only just a really valuable voice in the community, a tremendous fan and supporter of phenomenal artists. It would be interesting, you know, it's a shame in a way that someone hasn't developed a Marvel type universe at Dynamite. You know, like a roster of characters that are superhero characters that are interconnected. I know he's got the fantasy stuff tied up. You know, he's done great with licensed stuff. Having that kind of same reach that Image has for original comics, to the degree that I think it had with The Boys and things like that, where it could expand, would be phenomenal, because I think that he's one of those publishers who gets his comics where they need to get, who leaves a creative team alone, but he's a really smart guy. I mean, he's had this comic company for years. He's been surviving through all the ebbs and flows and doing a really, really good job of it. There's not frequently you get people that they love a thing and they're not too good at the thing. And, you know, Nick's good at the thing that he loves.
And you know what?
Amazing.
You know what the best part about it is, Matt? The best part about it is the irony in that he never set out to be a comic book publisher. That was never the goal. And he can tell the story because, that's not what he intended. It's just the way things worked out. And it's too much, you know, we don't have enough time to sort of get into it. But he never intended to be a publisher. He wasn't like, you know what? I think I'm going to try to publish my own, you know, comics and be, you know, set up a publishing company. That he didn't. Look, he's saying it right there.
Yeah.
He never wanted to be a publisher.
Part 2 of this discussion, right?
It sort of falls in, and then it just the way it sort of things, you know, you want to go this way, somehow things force you that way, and then next thing you know, you're publishing comics. 20 years later, you're celebrating your 20th anniversary. It's pretty wild, you know.
That's how we should pick our politicians, right? Like, who wants the job the least?
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, and someone else was saying, you know, talking about Al Williamson, and you know, he left pencils to ink because he felt less stress having to pencil. I mean, Williamson is also maybe the all-time greatest inker, like ever. And I'd probably nominate someone like Terry Austin, as one of the all-time greats. But it's tough. It's a job that's getting, I think, edged away. And certainly as artists are going digital, there's even less reason for them to hire inkers. Although I'll say this, having seen a lot of recent Marvel comics, and we'll say the ones that aren't necessarily wonderfully illustrated, because I think they started getting back to a house style after the Humberto Ramos era, where and I think Humberto Ramos is fantastic, and I think his is the look of the 2010s. Like when I think Marvel Comics, I think of his look. But they started bringing in guys that I think were a little bit more like manga, guys and girls. And you see the pencils, and there's not a lot there. Like you see the blue line transfer to the inker, and the inker's putting all the detail in it. Like everything that's on the page is the inker. And yet these are inkers that are just like kind of like people thrown into the process.
Getting help either, because the digital coloring took up a lot of space that the inkers used to define a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's led to less definable detail. And there's that era too of really bad color at Marvel. Like, and it's better now, but I think it's also kind of reliant upon. They don't want superstar artists because they know they'll have to pay them more. They're already. This is a writer's era, right? Like we know that the writers are the most important part of, from the publisher's perspective, the people that they need to get in place and lined up to sell comics. Or at least that's the thinking at the publishers. So, there's that creates a conflict point. It creates a crux point where if you're devaluing, that color process got really, really muddy. And I look at the X-23 Target X miniseries that Mike Choi did, and his pencils are gorgeous, and the comic looks like garbage. It's just like it almost looks airbrushed. Like really, really heavy-handed, terrible. And now comic coloring is amazing. Like almost every comic looks phenomenal now from the coloring point of view, to the point that it excuses bad penciling.
Not to the majority of people on this channel that host and watch and guest. Actually, we're constantly bitching about the, well, when I put up, when I do show and tells, right, I always have the colored version of right next to the original art.
Oh yeah.
And we're constantly bitching about the color, or whatever the color.
But how much like modern comic pages are you holding up? Comic pages the last 3 years of Marvel. It's like the pencils are no big, big hype. It's like but the coloring generally looks pretty good.
No, it looks pretty good, right? It's a big improvement to the 20 years ago and onward.
Excepting all the optics, of course, as somebody has pointed out, all the optics was the best. It's amazing.
All the optics, yeah. Well, that was Olaf.
Yep.
Steve Olaf. But the reason we always talk about that and shit on coloring, it's because we are original art collectors. We are in love with seeing the line art.
Yeah.
And in most cases, the color distracts from being able to see every detail.
It's also a size question. I mean, you're looking at this big as opposed to 11 by 17.
Yeah.
And for me, the
covers too, especially would be, covers can really be changed by color and really changed by digital color. And when you see those, how they hide the line work, because they're trying to do this kind of glossy thing, which I think they're kind of trying to look like computer generated art. But I have noticed a lot of really, really good. I've noticed a lot of really good color image too. But and maybe I'm actually looking at more of the color stuff that I like. I'm looking at more of the independent stuff. I mean, I like to see black and whites come back in a big way.
Well, the funny thing is that one of the first pieces of art I bought was actually a title page from J.R. Jr. and Al Williamson for Daredevil. And, then years later, I was looking at an Eternals page by J.R. Jr., the one that Neil Gaiman wrote. I'm looking like, how can this be the same penciler?
Yeah.
Because it's just sort of like, I don't get it. It's just like, it was the coloring that made the difference. And Al Williamson, of course, too.
Yeah. I had a double page splash from that Eternals that I sold a while ago. And it's like, one of those gigantic things. Then you see like a little tiny character in the corner, gives it scale. You could look at it like 100 times and not even notice like the superhero that's on the same page with this giant thing. I think everybody was hoping that was what was going to get adapted for the movie, and that went out the window. Yeah, I mean, we could go on and on about that aspect of it, but I think, as far as nostalgia plays into it, nostalgia is strong. I think at the end of the day, you have to miss what you don't have anymore, right? Which means it kind of has to go away. Like we all pine for the good old days. Why? Because the new days aren't as good. That's why the old days are good, because they're comparable. You're making a comparison to what's currently happening. And so it's easy to kind of look back with rose-colored glasses. And sometimes you go back and read stuff and it's not as good. Like I went back, I will say 10 years ago, and read Dark Knight Returns, and I was like, this isn't as good as I remember it being at all. Like it really does just seem like, Death Wish with a old man. And, it's, whereas I still really love the Daredevil comics, which really were Death Wish, to an extent.
And the one that I was mentioning, because Horde is hiding as well, as John Ostrander is a brilliant writer, and I think it gets missed. If you read that the Spectre series that he wrote, now it's very of the time.
You're gonna get Hoarder's Hide excited now, Heidjer. You need to watch what you know.
And I loved his Grimjack. I love Grimjack.
Yeah, I know.
I think he's a great writer. It's very much of the time though. But I mean, if you go back to the '60s and read some of the stuff, you're gonna go, "Oh, this is crap." But the art's fun.
There's an issue of
give me a
giant
sec.
size man thing.
Matt, give me a sec, just because I noticed a handful of people did drop out. And I just, before it gets any lower, I just want to quickly plug, and also because Shin Kazama, you asked what artists I will have next week for the sale. I mean, I don't got time to start getting into that. And yeah, you're going to have to tune in and find out, my friend. But just for those of you still here, just real quick, let me just show you the graphic here, whatever. So there you go. Comic Art Show and Sell. That's number 11. It's the first one I'll be doing for 2024. And it's primarily affordable art for pretty much every budget, I would say. So I don't know. Yeah, there you go, Shin Kazama. I hope you will tune in. No time to really give you the names of artists or whatever. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. Right there on the graphic, you'll see Van Sciver, George Perez, Bagley, and La Roca. So that's 4 examples anyways. Yeah, so check that out, please, next week. Yeah, sorry, Matt, to interrupt you, my friend.
I really like those circular panels, by the way. But yeah, I mean, I think we covered it. I think that when Maki Poop was talking about Savage Sword of Conan and Punisher, there's from that same era. So like, there's a issue of Giant Size Man Thing. It's Giant Size Man Thing #4. It has a really classic Man Thing cover. Is Mike Plug?
Probably Brunner. Maybe
it's Frank Brunner, and I think it's like the first solo story of Howard the Duck in it. But there's actually a story that's mainly text that I believe Roy Thomas wrote, and it's about like a comic book fan who gets bullied to death.
Thanks, CJ. Good night.
Yes, thanks, CJ. And this is from like 1974, and it won whatever comic award was around in 1974 for like the best short story in comics. And I read it for the first time probably when I was 16. I went back and read it again when I was in my early 20s. I was like, this is amazing. Like I would put this up against, the stuff that Alan Moore was writing in Swamp Thing. Like there was something to it. It went beyond the format and it became something. And so while that connected me back to the nostalgia of first discovering this very different type of thing, as was, to an extent when I started reading X-Men, I was getting stuff off those spinning racks, right? So it was inconsistent. I remember being a Hulk fan, and one week it would be one issue of Hulk, and you go back in a month and it would be completely different, and you realize that they weren't even necessarily putting them out in the order they got them.
Yeah,
that it'd be like an older issue. Because of that, like the kid whose parents owned the local store, I think was sticking his own comics back out in the rack. So I picked up one of the first comics I bought was Werewolf by Night #32. I kept it my entire life, and I got it slabbed. I got a 9.0. I kept it I had such reverence for it. I was able to keep it in good enough condition for 30 years that it got a 9.0.
That's crazy, 9.0.
But I only got it because it was like a 25% cover price. Every other comic in the rack was 30 cents. Oh. So like this kid was putting his old comics out and just like charging cover price for it. And that turned me on to comics. Like that got me super into comics. I was like, are there places that sell just comics? And I think I found it by accident in the Yellow Pages looking for a used bookstore. And there was an ad that said comics. And I went and they had back issues and they were in plastic bags and stuff. And I was blown away. And, you know, there was a 3 for $1 bin. It was all House of Mystery, House of Secrets, Unexpected. So I saw the first comic book that I recognized Wrights and signature on. And I bought every comic that had Wrights and signature on it. And the first comic book I ever paid more than cover price for was Twisted Tales #2 because it was a Wrights and cover. It was a recent back issue. I think it was 5 cents more than it had been when it was on the rack. And it came with the bag and board, which probably cost 10 cents to the comic shop. Yeah. But I mean, that brings you back, right? Like the stuff that you started collecting when you first started collecting is always going to mean something to you. It's kind of like the first rock and roll record you hear, or the first classical record that you hear, or you know, like the first time you went to a sports game, you know, and if it was your hometown team and if they won, and like this is what feeds into what we think about and why, because of the amazing hits of dopamine we get at new discovery. And the younger you are, the harder that dopamine hits, the more it stays with you, and the more it lasts. Sometimes it's a memory you have with a parent who passed away. Sometimes it's a sibling or a best friend that moved away that summer where you guys had like the greatest summer ever, and then you lose that friend. So you associate everything up to that point with a friendship that doesn't exist anymore, that stands in your head as that great friendship until, you know, years later. This is all valuable. This is all worth something. And anything that can bring you back to those powerful moments in life has real value. And if a better way of connecting to that is to go beyond the object itself and get the original artwork that represents it, then that is a personally, historically important thing. And that is unquantifiable. So again, nobody can say that, like, if I were able to buy the cover to Werewolf by Night #32, if it had not been the first appearance of Moon Knight, if it was just, you know, some Rich Buckler cover or something, if I paid a fortune for it, other people might think I was crazy, but it would have meant more to me than I could have possibly paid for it. And honestly, even 10 or 15 years later, the price is probably going to catch up. And maybe just because I paid a lot for that one, that influences the price overall and pushes the price up. So like that's also interconnected in a way that perhaps it shouldn't be, but we pay attention to these things.
Yeah, for sure. Well said, Matt.
Arigato.
To Shin Kazama, our one Japanese sounding person out there who may just be a fake name. Who knows? Whatever. But well, that's awesome. So have we covered everything we wanted to cover, or did you want to say something else, Heidjer, on your show tonight?
Probably not, but it's a good discussion because I think this is something, again, I'm just wanting to talk about something other than price for a change, just how much something costs, you know. And I think
tune in next week, everybody, when we look at the latest auction and we talk about the prices everything sold for. Just joking. But
Matt hasn't done his art drop. He hasn't opened his package yet.
Oh, what happened with that, Matt? Yeah. Okay. So in reference to the topic of price versus value, everyone, Matt said that he had a little unboxing to do that is connected to the topic. So I figured, we were supposed to do it actually at the earlier part of the show, but there's a lot of you here still, so we might as well do it now. And hold on, let me get you bigger on the screen here. Hold on. There you go.
Now everybody knows where I live. They're gonna wind that back. So as you can see, the most expensive piece on this invoice is $210. And so I love buying from Comic Link because it's only a 3% premium. And
even that, let's be clear, because people often don't specify. They say, oh yeah, only a 3% premium. But even that, it's not because it's a premium. It's because they know most people want to pay quickly with their credit card, and they just need to cover themselves so that you pay the credit card fee. Because at 10%, they're not making enough to also absorb 3%, right, on the total amount coming out of their little 10%. So
yeah, and they probably get what? Did they get 10% from the seller?
Yeah, so they take 10% from the seller. So for example, if it sells for
how
$100,
do they stay in business? How do they stay in business?
Right. Think about it. On a $100 item, they only get 10. They only get $10, right?
Yep.
But if the buyer pays with the credit card, right, on $100, they lose 3, right? 3 to the credit card. So if they had to absorb their own fee, they're losing $3 out of the $10 that they're making. So they're actually losing. They would be losing 30% of their commission. That's insanity, right? So
it is insanity.
Sorry, go ahead. And
they're doing the Lord's work for us here.
Yeah.
So here's the Jorge Fornes Batman illustration.
Oh, Jorge Fornes is good. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's a really nice Batman piece.
How much was this? This was the $210 piece.
Wow. And okay, let me just say, I got to say this right now because it's a perfect, it's not even a segue, it's actually related. So keep showing it, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
So as Matt said, everyone, this was a $220 or $10 piece?
10.
$210 for this piece. Now, admittedly, things on Comic Link, I always say this, guys, you know it. It's a buyer's market. Things go cheaper than they should.
They go cheap. Yeah,
exactly. But even still, that's way cheap. Let me give you an idea how cheap that is. A friend of mine who was a guest on a show and tell recently with me, I'm not going to say who, just because of what I'm about to say, but he recently was telling me that he is jumping on a commission list for Jorge Fornes. And okay, maybe the commission that looks to be what, 11 by 14, maybe, Matt, you think?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So maybe the commission is 11 by 17, whatever, a little bit bigger. Okay. And his commission, I believe he said, is something in the minimum area of $1,500.
Yeah. No, I know, because I buy stuff from his dealer all the time.
Oh, okay. So there you go. So imagine, holy crap, what a that's getting value for your money, right?
Now this is a lot cheaper.
Okay.
This was $151. And this is from the Joker Year of the Villain, #1, page 4.
It's a nice page.
And so that character that he's leaning over and he puts the gun to his head on the bottom, I think is great. He's the narrator of this story.
Okay.
It's very much in the mold of the Joker graphic novel in that capacity, the one by Brian Azzarello. And so this issue is the first appearance of that character, but this is the 4th page. I believe it's the 3rd page that he appears on. But it's also just like a kind of a nice, it's a half splash, with the Joker doing jokery things. It's got those crazy bats flying out of the shadow.
And who is this is Philip Tan?
Yes.
Yeah, Philip Tan. And how much did this one cost?
This was $151.
That's what I'm saying. Like, everybody, you need to buy shit from them because $151 for a nice Joker-related panel page with nice art. Yeah, it's crazy.
It was originally marked $375 because you can see it.
Yes. But that's the Comic Link. That's the Comic Link factor at play. I'm telling you, it's a buyer's market. A lot of the stuff that I bought there I got it for way cheaper than it was originally sold for. Okay. So who did that though?
So this is the ink. I know him for his inks mainly. This is Art Nichols.
Oh, and Art Nichols. Okay.
So Art Nichols worked with Kirby.
Art Nichols. Yeah, he ripped off a bunch of collectors on commissions and went back in the day.
This is probably one of them.
That may have affected things,
So obviously a redraw of Avengers #4 with the Ultimate title on top of it. This was $170.
$170. I mean, yeah, come on, that's ridiculous. That's so ridiculously cheap. Like it's dirt cheap, literally.
Yeah. I mean, classic stuff here. This is. I thought that maybe he used a Kirby blue line and went over it, but it looks like he redrew it. And then, he changed Hulk. I mean, Thor obviously has the long hair and the beard, and
So if I may,
touche,
if
sir.
I may share one quick double page, which I got from Heritage, and this goes a little more what I'm purchasing, and I know Ruben's sensitive, so there's a little nudity here, Ruben. So I apologize.
No, I'm all for it. I just don't want our show to get taken down from YouTube because of it.
No, so this is from Prometheus Primeval, 1984 Pacific, Tim Conrad. So
Conrad, that's awesome.
This was 900 with the juice.
With the juice, yeah, 900, yeah.
I mean,
not even friend.
I think a phenomenal page. The detail is just amazing.
Yeah. Oh no, it's so Conrad.
And this is a golden example of, like I said, you bring something like that to, the roadshow type program, and they're like, this represents the American independent horror and sci-fi heavy comics of the early 1980s from publishers like Pacific and Eclipse, and they assign a value just based on that. If they can't say that this is an artist who is very well known. And there's a lot of those artists, and especially guys that came out of the Kubert school that were working and illustrating for, Eclipse and Pacific. And to a lesser extent, you had guys from Pratt that were doing Aardvark Vanaheim stuff. But that it falls into kind of a Caliber Press, that it falls under this kind of grand umbrella of amazing independent work that is underrated, that people don't know the names of these people as household names. We know because they're credited in the publications, and it's easy to double check, and you can see, and there is that provenance, but that it will be seen as part of a movement, that it will reach a grander audience as being part of a movement. There's a art dealer in New York. He publishes a monthly little digest booklet. And it's like a lot of people from the Hudson River Valley School, and like there's these different beautiful like landscape paintings. It's not really my thing. And you look at it, you're like, I've never heard of this person, but because it's Hudson Valley School, this is a $90,000 painting.
Right.
It's just the era, where it came from, and that's all that matters to that fine art buyer. The great thing, and this proves the point, we get right back to the beginning, that what makes it a good investment is the quality of the work, the enjoyment of it, the fact that it relates to an era within your life that may also connect into the art. But even if you, irrespective of all those things, it's great illustration. So if the worst part of it is that it's awesome, everything else is upside.
Yeah. Well said. Very, very well said, actually. And Marcus wants to tell you it's sick. Sick. He's really caught up on that sick guy. Oh man. What'd you say, Heidjer?
I said it made an impression on Marcus.
He made an impression on me too. I don't know why I keep watching those videos. Like every time I watch and I hear him say that, I'm like, oh god, shut up.
It's amazing.
So funny. Oh,
Joshua Middleton is in the chat.
So much great art out there. It hurts. Yeah, because there's always so much more art than any single one of us can ever hope to afford in our lifetimes, or many, many lifetimes, right? Yep. As I always say, every single auction that passes us, just the auctions alone, they're selling tens of millions of dollars worth of comic art at each and every auction. Like, it's unbelievable, right? Like, we cannot.
And I wish I could afford Josh Middleton Batgirl covers. Like, this is so.
What's up with that, Josh?
Josh was in the chat on Comic Art Live the other day. I was like, Josh Middleton's in the house. Like, I was literally very, very excited about it because I love his work. And there's a handful of artists I think whose taking over of a classic character breathed absolute new life into it, and without changing much, just like really bringing a touch to it. And like, if my favorite character is absolutely Dick Grayson in his many various forms, my second favorite character is Batgirl. I mean, like, absolutely. And my God, like, that's one of those things. Like, I think to an extent, like, I would, if I could find somebody that had some of those amazing Middleton covers, I would trade half of what I have in, you know, my for trade for sale book just to have that, because it means so much to me. It was one of those things. I would go to Comic-Con every year. I never went to the panels, and half the time I had to work a table, and it was just like, you know, that nightmare of having to trudge through the tables and get back and forth for food and get locked behind a table. And one year I got to go to all these panels, and there was a mom and daughter both dressed like different versions of Batgirl, and the mom I think was in a wheelchair, and we're sitting right next, and they loved that run, and I'm like, I think I have to see what they're talking about. And then it flashes like the artwork. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, this is so much better than what I would have ever expected from a Batgirl title. But I mean, well deserved, Josh. I mean, it's like phenomenal stuff. Like, I love it.
And let's just, since Josh
my bucket list. I'll trade you some stuff, Josh.
Since Josh is here, and since you brought it up, Matt, you said you wished you could afford the covers. Is that to say that they're available, but you really don't have the money to dish out for them?
I had seen some go up for sale. They tend to go, like, people who buy them keep them. And that's the thing too. Like, I mean, that's what you know about, what do we know about Sandman art? Like, not a lot pops up because the people who have it love it, right? You know, like, someone's got to die for some of that stuff to become available.
It's gonna be the last piece of my hands. The first piece I got, I've had it for 30 years. It's not. That's gonna be the last one out of the collection.
Yeah. So the you know, I think that that series connected so much with the people who were buying it that I don't think that stuff generally comes up for sale. I think he might have kept some stuff too. Seems like he has. We need to talk, Josh. I'll get some stuff I would happily trade.
He said he's got a drawer full of stuff that he doesn't know what to do with. A few Batgirls too. I don't know if he means sketches, prelims, or finished art or what, but you guys need to get in touch, I guess.
Oh yeah.
But
I'm easy to find. I'm identified right there on screen.
There you go. And yeah, by the way, anybody watching, still 3 dozen people. I can't believe it this late. So thank you all, first of all, for not only tuning in, but for sticking around as long as you have, those of you who are still here. And also don't forget that, as usual, for any of you who are interested in seeing what's in the collections of our esteemed guests here, Heidjer and Matt, just go down here below in the description, and below the description, you will see all the relevant links to either their Comic Fans galleries to see their collections. And in Matt's case, many more links than that. Yeah, so investigate and see what they're all up to, and you can check out my shit too if you want. You don't have to though, you know.
23.
But yeah, so this is awesome. Oh, what's that? We can talk. I do have 23.
That cover is so good. Like that.
But he's letting you know. He's letting you know.
Teasing
People
me.
seem to like that. Yeah.
I'll.
How's that for a little? Hey, it's not going to be cheap, man.
I know. I have a lot of stuff to trade, Josh.
Let
me know.
You're not helping things. Well, you're not helping Matt, Southern Comic Geek. You're definitely hurting Matt right now.
No, it is gorgeous. I love it. It's I mean, all his covers are incredible. The work's amazing.
That's awesome. I'd make Matt buy all of my Transmet art before I sell him my Middleton. That's
at least it would be Derek Robertson. You know, I mean, Derek Robertson did good art. You know, I don't love the comic itself, and I'm not a huge fan of the writer.
Interesting.
He's got a bad reputation for
who?
The writer of Transmet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for being kind of sleazy. But
okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that Josh is saying, you know, he's always just sold his covers directly, and usually to a handful of collectors who reach out as soon as they see something, you know, from the solicitations, which is how most people do it anyways. But Josh, I'm curious, can you let us know? So are you saying you've always just sold the covers directly, but are you using a rep to sell the interiors, and then you've always hung on to the covers and did those by yourself? That's kind of a weird thing that I don't think I've ever noticed any other artists do, but let us know. Oh, and now he's saying, by the way, this is my first time here, and while I don't know you guys, I really appreciate your love and passion for the art. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
It is your first time here. I noticed that right away, and I appreciate you dropping in. By the way, Josh, if you don't mind, first of all, just let me know how did you come across the show? Like where if you just let me know where you saw I don't know, how did you find this here? That's I'm just curious.
Bathroom wall.
Look at orders. Don't let them fool you. They're all a bunch of dicks.
Of course, Scott would say that. It always takes.
I guess he sells all his stuff. That's great. So he's never used a rep. Maybe that's why I've never really seen this stuff go up for sale. I must have seen something go up for sale at some point. But yeah, it was
interesting. Wow,
so good. Yeah, I would love to work out a trade if that's possible. But yeah, definitely get in touch.
Hey, Josh,
get a lot of mileage out of me.
Am I forgetting? Am I forgetting or maybe potentially confusing you with someone? But are you Toronto based? Are you Canadian? I feel like when I first was introduced to your stuff, it was at CrossGen. That's when I first saw your stuff. At CrossGen, and I could swear that somebody had mentioned you were Canadian and from the Toronto area, but maybe I'm confusing that story with somebody else. But I'm only asking because I'm Canadian too in Montreal, so that's why I'm asking out of curiosity.
I mean, let's not bury the lead here, but also the first person to ever illustrate X-23.
Of course, yes. Love X-23. Yeah, but let's not remind Josh about what happened to the cover after he had let it go.
Yeah.
Early on. No, okay. Yeah, no, Carrie Andrews I know is Canadian. Yeah, him I knew for sure. I thought you were as well, but appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for letting
that's cultural appropriation there, Ruben. I hate to tell you that.
Say what?
Cultural appropriation. You're trying to make him Canadian. Come on.
Yeah, the Supergirl covers. The Supergirl covers are great too. Absolutely. To me though, I love the X-23 character as well a lot, and I think that Josh and Mike Choi and really Danny Shinyalua are the only three people that ever illustrated her age appropriately, and which I think is important. He hates X-23.
Yeah, I love that. I hate
X-23. It's like the bane of his existence at this point.
I wonder why.
but the amazing thing is that too frequently we'll have characters that are written and drawn as a certain age and in a certain demographic, and I think respond to people because of that, and then immediately get turned into adult characters, drawn inappropriately and stuff like that. And that Batgirl 23 is spectacular.
And I knew about Steve as well. I knew about Steve. Yeah, that's why somehow it's just you that for some reason I associated with you as Canadian, but maybe I just wanted you to be. I don't know. Yeah. But I appreciate it. Thanks for clearing it up. Sorry, Matt. Sorry.
No, sure. But yeah, shoot.
Sorry.
Reach out for sure. Definitely, Josh.
Let me just quickly interrupt right away again. It's funny because we were at 34 viewers and dropping, and then it suddenly jumped up to 40. So somehow we picked up a bunch of viewers as we went on. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead and say.
Jeff Whitting must be back from dinner, and it's the mom and the mom-in-law.
Yeah.
Brought the whole restaurant back with him.
All the West Coast guys are finishing work and tuning in now. How they finished their supper. All right, it's time, and let's tune in and hang out, see what's what. That is so funny. And thank you for rallying the likes as always, Nick. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Please, if you are watching and you haven't done so yet, please, if you don't mind, just click on that thumbs up button somewhere right beneath where I'm pointing here. I'd really appreciate that. That would be very, very nice. Oh, Josh.
Yeah.
So you're a PA guy, but you're currently living in Japan. Wow. What a great story. I don't know that that's a story per se, but that's so cool. Living in Japan. Wow. That's great. That is so cool.
Tokyo, Osaka, or somewhere else?
Look at you. You're ready to stalk him. Makes Matt trade you a $10,000 DWJ pieces.
As if I had one.
You don't have one. You've got two.
I get zero.
Wow, a decade. Holy shit, man. That's wild.
It's been 10 years since I've been in Japan, and I used to go all the time.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
wild. Out of curiosity,
we traded. We passed like ships in the night.
You did. Out of curiosity, Josh, does it have to do with meeting someone and ending up there, or you just loved the land of the rising sun and decided to stay? That's kind of cool. On the west coast of Japan, fairly rural. Oh,
other side of Osaka. So Tony, Tempting Toys, I think he's got 160 passport stamps from Japan.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess when you're into Transformers toys, you want to be going to Japan. If you want to track down Transformers stuff, I mean, you better go to the land where it originated from, right?
Yep.
If you want to track down some cool shit. I'm not sure what are you saying, Tempting Toys? Nihon Sunday?
Nihon Sunday. Nihon is Japanese, but and then Josh said so desu, which means it is so. So desu ne.
So this is it. So this. These guys are having a Japanese conversation back and forth in the chat.
Yeah.
Phonetically speaking, of course.
And so means like very so. Like yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So funny.
Well, cool. I think we hit our peak. We can't know where to go but down from here.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So everybody, I really, really appreciate it. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Guys, this was so super fun for me. I don't know about you guys, but I had a great time, and I thank you as always for doing this. Again, it's always I'm always very appreciative when anybody comes in, either in the chat or in the studio with me, and especially spending as much time as you guys do, because you know how long my shows always last, right? So I don't, of course, with West Coasters and sort of anybody behind the East Coast, even Heidjer, you're like Central, right? Heidjer? Yeah.
Before turning to a bunker.
Yeah, it makes me feel a little bit less bad, because it's like, okay, it's not so late for you as it is for me, But I definitely really appreciate it. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it for being here. And yes, thank you all for hitting that like button. Really appreciate that. Blue lines. I'm not sure what the joke on the blue lines thing is.
The blue lines thing, yeah. Marcus is taking it way back.
This is the least I think Ruben has ever talked on his own show. You're right. I think if we went back and counted the words, I think you'd be right. I think so, Scott. Thank you. And you're happy about it, I'm sure. Yes. So funny. Thank you, Matt, Heidjer, and Ruben, for the show. See you in the chats next week. Sounds good. And Ruben will be well rested for the next show, so watch out. Yeah, well, the next show is just a sales show, and I do those by myself. So yeah, you'll be hearing nobody but me next week. And who else we got? Fun stuff. Have to go back and watch the first 2 hours. Awesome. Thank you, Carl. I appreciate you as always. And everybody, check out Carl's collection here on YouTube. Mm-hmm. Some fun videos. What else we got? Thank you. Very, very, very appreciative of you as well. All the way in Australia, David. Thank you as always. Have a great day. And now we got Josh talking with Nick. Excellent. Okay. Thanks, JC. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, JC.
Hopefully catch you guys next week. Movies. See, look at this. Marcus never wants it to end. For him, it's the never-ending party. He just wants to talk movies now,
Yep. We talked about doing a movie show. That's a whole different podcast.
What's that?
We talked about doing a movie show. That's a whole different podcast.
You talked about me in a movie show?
No, you and I talked about doing a movie show podcast a while back.
Well, like I told you, we've done them. We've done 2 of them on my channel.
Yeah.
It's
my bread and butter.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. Go Chicago. Thanks very much for your support as always, Rick. Really means a lot to me. You're one of the originals, so I really, really appreciate that. Thank you. And look, Nicky B is excited because he just realized Josh is here.
And Josh promised him he's still working on his Red Sonja cover, that it's on its way.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
That's funny. Deadlines. Thank you, Eternals. Appreciate you dropping by as always. Thank you. Any Transmet art next week? There is no Transmet art next week.
It's the spider. Spider. What's his character's name?
Who from Transmet?
Yeah.
Oh, I never read it, so
yeah,
no idea. But stick with me just for a second, okay, guys?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna put up the. I guess we'll close out. Spider Jerusalem.
Yep,
He said.
Yep.
Spider Jerusalem. Good night, Lee. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Very entertaining and informational. It was. I love it.
Thanks,
cool.
Lee.
And yeah, so I'm going to leave you guys with the thumbnail graphic for next week's sale, I guess, and we'll close it out that way. And yeah, let's put that there. And so yeah, so again, as usual, it's the same time, same back channel, March 3rd, Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific. Yeah, so like I said, I don't even know how many pieces I'll have. But it'll be your standard show. Like the last show in November, I may do a recap. I think it was the only time I ever did a recap. Depends what you guys want to do. So you guys always kind of make the rules, and then I'll do whatever you guys want to do. So just come here for that. It'll be fun. It'll be affordable art. And yeah, we'll see what we see. Ian, I do an accident sometimes. I don't know what you're saying. But thank you for being here, Ian. Thanks for coming back. You are not getting Madam Web art, Marcus. I don't know why you're so obsessed with talking about Madam Web tonight. Oh boy, Juggernaut. Yes, sir. Be here next week, Nikki V. Buy the little Juggernaut art. Why not? Why don't you? So that's it, everyone. I appreciate it again very, very much. Almost 36 people right to the last second. So that's really awesome of you. And Josh, thank you. It's due today, Mr. You got Mr. You're late on your late on handing in your deadline work. Thanks for dropping in, Josh. Really appreciate you for your first time. Hope to see you again in the future. And yeah, thanks to you again. Hey, nice to meet you, Josh. Thank you. I appreciate it. And you're always welcome. And that's it. So we will see all of you next week. Oh, and again, just a quick reminder. First, before you see me next week, tune in to Nikki B's show this coming Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific on the EXP right here on YouTube. All right, guys. Thanks very much. Peace.